Hey guys, tonight we go back in time. Not to the battlefield, not to the palace, not even to the dojo, but to a tiny, smoke-scented wooden tea house nestled behind a Kyoto villa. It's barely dawn, the paper screen still bathed in a soft grey mist, and your forehead is already damp from panic sweat. You're not a samurai, not a swordsmith, not even a nobleman's food taster. No, you're something far more delicate, more endangered, more likely to end the day covered in ash and regret. You are a samurai's tea servant. You'll scrub, bow, stoke fires, and wield bamboo whisks with trembling reverence. You'll try to understand poetry while balancing trays with your pinky toe. And if you spill the matcha, you'll wish the tatami mat could swallow you whole. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake by the end, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the sound of clacking wood, a stick rapping gently against the wooden edge of the house. The Hayoshigi, it's not a threat, at least not yet. It's just the night watchman announcing the dawn. But to you, it's a death knell, because you were supposed to be up before him. Your bedding, a single futon rolled atop thin tatami, feels like the most luxurious prison in history. You throw off your covers, already bracing for the consequences. The paper shoji screens let in a dim, silvery glow. Outside, the morning mist curls through the carefully landscaped garden like it knows how to behave. You, however, do not. Your knees pop like rice crackers as you crawl across the floor, desperately trying not to step with your full foot. Flat-footed walking is for farmers. You're a servant to the tea master of Lord Kagawa, a mid-level samurai with a flair for powdered aesthetics and a sword so sharp it's rumored to slice shadows. And today, of all mornings, you overslept. Your first obstacle, that ridiculous lintel beam over the doorway. You forget to bow just low enough, and whack! Your forehead connects with ancestral pine. Quietly, but not quietly enough. There's no bell, no ticking clock, no buzzer to yell at you. Just the eternal oppressive pressure of a routine perfected over centuries and designed to break human beings in the most poetic way possible. Historians still argue whether tea servants lived better or worse than common field labourers. Some say it was an honourable, cushy job of grace and culture. Others note that no amount of elegance makes up for being yelled at for placing a ladle at a slightly incorrect angle. You're pretty sure the truth lies in the bruise forming on your forehead. As you shuffle into the outer prep room, known as the Mizuya, you mutter silent apologies to the lacquerware. The bamboo ladles are exactly where they should be, arranged in strict order by size, curve, and wood grain. You don't remember putting them there. Probably your older co-worker, the one who speaks in monosyllables and glares like a disgruntled heron. The air smells of faint charcoal and yesterday's incense. A stack of fire-starting twigs lies beside the brazier, and beside that, a small stone container of water so cold it might as well be judging you. First job of the day, all fresh water from the well. You tiptoe past the garden, past the camellias that your master insists are symbolically aligned with this season's aesthetic vocabulary. Whatever that means. All you know is that you tripped over one once and got a 2-hour lecture about visual rhythm in space. You lift the well's lid. A soft creak, the rope pulley moans as the bucket descends into inky blackness. You draw it up slowly, muscles trembling. The bucket sloshes. You do not spill. It's a miracle. You internally thank the tea gods, who may or may not be the same as the rice gods, and carry the water back, dripping just a little on the stepping stones. Back in the Mizuya, you light the brazier, or try to. First, you stack the twigs like a little Jenga tower of despair. Then comes the flint and steel. You strike and spark and strike and hiss as your sleeve gets a little too close. Smoke curls. A coal catches. You blow gently, praying. The fire crackles to life. Congratulations. You have achieved basic pre-industrial survival. But don't get cocky, because now it's time to prepare the first tools of the morning. The ladle, the bamboo whisk, chasen, the tea caddy, natsume, and the bowl, chawan. Each has its own handling ritual. You try to remember them. You don't. The chasen, carved by hand from a single piece of bamboo, is so delicate it looks like a sea urchin with anxiety. You hold it like it's made of spun sugar. Your hand is shaking, not from reverence, from fear. Your master might be asleep, or meditating, or reading an obscure Chinese poem backwards. But if he walks in now and sees you touching the chasen with your left hand instead of the right, you may be demoted to firewood sweeper. As you set the tools onto a small cloth, your sleeve brushes against the chakin, the white linen cloth used to wipe the tea bowl, and it falls to the floor. You freeze. You have just defiled a sacred object with your clumsy aura. No one saw. You tell yourself no one saw. Then comes the sound, a soft cough from the hallway, not a sick cough, not an oops I'm dying cough, a judgmental cough, a start over and pretend I didn't see that cough. The master is awake, and your day is about to get exponentially worse. You bow. Not just any bow. A deep, slow, spine-unraveling descent towards the tatami that signals equal parts reverence, fear, and, if we're being honest, an attempt to hide your face from your master's quietly withering gaze. Your forehead taps the mat, not too loud, not too soft, the exact pressure required to say, please pretend I did everything correctly this morning, and that I most certainly did not drop the sacred linen cloth onto the floor like a barbarian. You stay in the bow for a few seconds longer than necessary, hoping that if you remain still, time will pause, and someone else will finish preparing the tea utensils for you. This is a mistake. The master says nothing, but the silence thickens like over-steeped censure. You shuffle backward, knees cracking gently, and rise without fully rising, just enough to enter what your training manual calls the posture of subservient readiness. You've never seen a diagram, but you assume it means try not to look like a confused frog. Now it's time for the tatami tango. Your first real task is to make your way from the prep room to the tea room proper. This means crossing about 8 feet of woven straw flooring without committing a single cultural offence, which is trickier than it sounds. You must never step directly on the edges of the tatami mats. The seams are sacred. Well, technically, they're just structurally weaker, but symbolically, they carry 1,000 years of etiquette and metaphysical significance. Historians still argue whether stepping on a mat's edge was originally a matter of spiritual concern or simply an effort to protect the seams from fraying. Either way, your job is to avoid them like they're hot lava. You hover 1 foot forward, pause, adjust angle, step again. You realize, horrifyingly, that your left big toe is brushing the stitching of a seam. You freeze mid-shuffle. Somewhere in the house, a crow calls out. It sounds like it's laughing at you. You recenter, a little hop slide. Now you're aligned. Perfect. Almost. Until your sleeve catches a porcelain cup balanced on a shelf near the doorway. It doesn't break, but it wobbles. Just a little. Just enough to let the room know that you have no idea what you're doing. The master doesn't speak, but you feel his gaze flick toward the cup, then back to you. He turns and disappears through a paper screen, and you could swear the rustling of his robe sounds disappointed. You bow again. Not at him. He's gone. Just a general-purpose bow, the kind that says, I am sorry for existing slightly off-axis. Inside the tea room, everything is simple, symmetrical, and full of landmines. A scroll hangs in the tokonoma, the raised alcove meant for seasonal decoration and aesthetic contemplation. You've been told not to look directly at it unless invited. It's a calligraphy piece today, one you recognize. Wake Seijaku, harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. You internally chant the phrase like a mantra to prevent yourself from screaming. The tea room is empty for now, but that won't last. You need to prepare it. This means arranging the implements with all the precision of brain surgery, but using cloths and wooden bowls instead of scalpels. The tatami creaks softly under your knees as you move to your station. You kneel with great care, remembering to align your knees just right. An exact width apart, measured loosely by 2.5 fists. You don't have time to confirm if your fists are historically accurate. You reach for the fukusa, a square of purple silk tucked into your sash. It's meant for purifying the tea scoop and caddy, and must be folded in a precise choreography of folds, flips, and flourishes. You do not fold it correctly. It ends up looking like a silk dumpling. You panic, unfold it, and try again. This time, the silk slides off your lap and lands, of course, on the tatami seam. You gently, reverently retrieve it, as if rescuing a drowning kitten. You pretend not to hear the sound of someone clearing their throat just outside the paper wall. You manage to fold it into a semi-respectable square and pick up the chashaku, the bamboo scoop. This tool is curved, elegant, and so light it barely registers in your fingers. You attempt the formal wipe, right, left, twist, press, right again. Your fingers tremble. The scoop almost slips. You catch it, just barely, and silently beg the universe not to add dropped the chashaku to your resume of shame. The natsume, the tea caddy, comes next. It's small, round, and made of lacquered wood, so polished it reflects your terrified eyebrows. You open it and see the powdered matcha inside, a vivid green, vibrant as moss after rain. You're supposed to admire it, silently, for a moment, to appreciate the artistry of the tea. You do so. Then you realize you're staring too long and probably look weird. You close the lid, gently, slowly. Then come the steps. Set down the chashaku, purify the bowl, return the cloth. Each motion is scripted. You try to follow it exactly. It's like acting in a play with no lines, no cues, and the constant possibility of being metaphorically executed for forgetting your part. Just as you finish setting the last implement, the master re-enters. He doesn't look at you. He looks at the tools. His eyes flick across the setup like a hawk judging a sand mandala. He grunts. That's either praise or an indication that you failed in 12 invisible ways. He glides into position and kneels without a sound. You try to do the same. Your knees crack. The sound echoes. You don't look at him. You stare straight ahead, hands in your lap, spine stiff but humble. He says, "The scroll is crooked. Your soul leaves your body for the second time this morning." You stand, very slowly. You bow so deeply, your forehead almost brushes your own knees. Then you shuffle, heel to toe, back toward the tokonoma, where the offending scroll now hangs, betraying you. The scroll isn't obviously crooked. Not to the untrained eye. To you, it looks perfectly fine, which is the real problem, because it means you'll have to correct it based on vibes alone, like an apprentice astrologer adjusting the stars. You edge toward the alcove and kneel. Your fingers tremble as they reach for the hanging rod. You gently nudge it a fraction to the left, then a hair back to the right. You pretend this helped. Some scholars debate whether servants actually had the authority to adjust anything in the tokonoma, or if that was always the master's job. Today, it seems you've been granted this honor, which feels less like a promotion and more like a trap. You retreat 3 steps, kneel again, and bow. The master does not respond. A silence settles, thick as overcooked mochi. Then he speaks. Just one word. Water. You spring into motion, because you've been preparing for this all morning. Sort of. Back in the mizuya, you reach for the wooden ladle, hishaku, resting over the iron kettle, kama, which now hums gently over the sunken hearth. The charcoal fire has heated the water to near boiling, though of course it must never boil. That would be uncouth. You lift the lid with the ladle's handle. This is the proper way. and then pour a scoop of water into the tea bowl to warm it. It splashes, not a lot, just a single insolent droplet that leaps from the rim of the chawan onto the mat like surprise, shame. You glance at the master. He says nothing. That's worse. You quickly swirl the water around the inside of the bowl, just as you've been taught, letting it coat the surface with warmth. Then you discard the water into the hidden waste container. Not visible, not audible. The goal is to make it seem like the water vanished by magic. And now, time for the morning cleaning. Yes, cleaning the tea bowl, even though it was just washed, even though it is visibly pristine, even though no one has touched it since the last ceremony. It must still be wiped with the chakin, the white linen cloth, because this is not cleaning in the modern sense. This is purification. This is performance. You lift the chakin with both hands, fold it in half, smooth the creases. Then, with the slow deliberateness of a monk performing a rite, you wipe the inside of the bowl in 3 clockwise motions, then the rim, all while breathing evenly and trying not to shake. Your right knee is starting to go numb. Historians still debate whether the intense emphasis on cleaning in the tea ceremony originated from spiritual roots, or if it was more about class status, purity as a symbol of wealth. But in your numb legs and aching back, you're starting to think it was just a clever way to keep servants too busy to rebel. You return the bowl. Your master gives the tiniest nod. You feel like you've won a war. Now, on to the flower arrangement. Yes, there's also a flower arrangement. Of course there is. Technically, it's called chabana, a stripped-down, seasonal bouquet that expresses transience and harmony with nature. Unlike fancy ikebana, this style avoids symmetry, flair, or anything that says, "Look at me." It's supposed to feel like someone casually plucked a few blossoms on the way to enlightenment. You kneel beside the tiny ceramic vase. Inside is a single twig of plum blossom, a sprig of mountain grass, and what might be a weed. They look like they've just been pulled out of a haiku. You adjust the angle of the plum blossom ever so slightly. A whisper of motion. You pull back. You stare. You hate it. You touch it again. Now it's worse. Eventually, you give up and settle for the least offensive version. Nature, you decide, is imperfect anyway. Hopefully, your master agrees. You return to your station and wait. Every breath is a meditation. Every blink is carefully timed. The room is so quiet you can hear a cicada outside hesitating. Then your master says, "The flower is acceptable." You bow as if he just declared you heir to the shogunate. Then he adds, "Ash." Your stomach drops, because this means you forgot the final part of the prep ritual, cleaning out the old charcoal ash in the hearth and laying new coals in the exact shape and order specified by, well, a 500-year-old secret society of tea perfectionists, apparently. You open the small hatch and see the evidence of your failure. Yesterday's ash lies undisturbed, like a crime scene. The charcoal pieces are collapsed in on themselves, their elegant geometric arrangement now just a sad pile of lumps. You kneel beside the hearth and reach for the long-handled iron tongs. These were designed specifically to lift the old charcoal with dignity, grace, and a 90% chance of pinching your fingers. You work quickly but quietly, scooping out the old coals and dusting the stone hearth with a horsehair brush. The fresh coals must be laid in a particular pattern known as gyo no gotai, the semi-formal style. There are others, shin for formal, so for casual. You don't dare try to guess which is required today. You settle for semi-formal, because your whole existence feels semi-formal at best. You lay the coals, large piece here, smaller one angled there, another to form a bridge. You sprinkle fragrant ash powder to settle it. It looks decent, not elegant, but stable. As you back away, a puff of ash escapes the hearth and settles, like a grey kiss, onto the edge of your robe. You close your eyes and accept this. The master rises. He says nothing, which is something. You rise too, slowly, carefully. Your knees are officially ruined. and the tea guests haven't even arrived yet. You don't even bother pretending your legs still work. As you hobble into the back prep area, one knee bent at an angle geometry teachers would frown upon, you consider briefly whether collapsing behind a screen and pretending to faint would save you from what's next. It won't, because now comes the part of the morning that separates the enthusiastic novices from the broken husks of true tea apprentices. The fire. Not just any fire. The ceremonial fire. The one that must be ignited from hand-picked twigs, laid in precise layers, and coaxed into life with a breath gentle enough to stir incense smoke but strong enough to wake embers. No matches, no lighters, just your own unreliable lungs and the crushing pressure of centuries of tradition. You kneel beside the small hearth and regard the humble tools of your torment. The straw, the twigs, the fine black charcoal sticks that your master grades like a jeweler examining diamonds. You arrange the kindling in a pyramid, because pyramids feel trustworthy. Then the kikubai, the elegant charcoal pieces named after chrysanthemum branches, are set with the delicacy of handling newborn sparrows. You strike the flint. Nothing. Again. Spark. Again. Spark. On the third try, something catches. A whisper of smoke curls from the straw. You hold your breath. You fan gently with a small folded fan, keeping the draft even. The glow deepens. A flicker of flame. Success. And then, sizzle. The edge of your sleeve grazes the hot side of the brazier. A narrow line of steam rises from your robes. You yank your arm back, bow deeply to the fire in apology, and vow to never wear loose sleeves again, which is a shame because that's the entire uniform. You add a final layer of ash with a small spatula, creating a white, even surface on which the kettle will sit like a guest of honor. It's absurdly beautiful. You feel a flicker of pride. Then your master reappears. He eyes the fire, steps forward, adjusts one piece of charcoal by an imperceptible degree. Acceptable, he murmurs. This is the highest praise you have ever received. You nearly cry. Next comes one of the most unnerving stages of the entire ordeal, whisk inspection. Yes, the whisk. Known as the chasen, it is carved from a single piece of bamboo into delicate tines finer than a squirrel's eyelashes. Each one curves with tiny, silent judgment. If even one is bent or broken, you'll need to confess to a utensil-related crime. You lift the chasen from its stand and place it on the display cloth for the master to examine. He peers at it, tilts his head, squints. You think he's trying to see if your soul is clean enough to touch it. He grunts. That means, you may use this, but only because we don't have a spare. You retrieve the tea bowl, the chawan. It's smooth, heavy, and irregularly shaped, on purpose. It's said to evoke the imperfections of nature, though you suspect it also hides thumbprints and tea dribbles quite well. You rinse it again, even though you already rinsed it earlier. The water this time is just warm enough to fog the surface slightly, like breath on a mirror. Then comes the moment you've been dreading since the beginning of the day. You are to whisk a small practice bowl of tea, just to check the froth. This sounds easy, but it is not easy. It is a ritual of wrist, timing, and breath. The powder must dissolve entirely. The bubbles must be fine and even, like tiny green pearls. Too few. Weak. Too many. Brutish. Uneven. Social disgrace. You sift a tiny scoop of matcha into the bowl. It's the consistency of talcum powder and the color of envy. You add hot water, not boiling, and brace yourself. With the chasen held upright, you begin whisking in quick, delicate M-shaped motions, back and forth, back and forth. The whisk hums faintly against the ceramic. You feel a rhythm emerging. The foam begins to rise, silky and light. You almost relax. And then, your wrist cramps. Just a twinge, but enough. The whisk jerks slightly and catches on the bottom of the bowl. You hear it, scrape. The sound of shame. Your master's nostrils flare. Historians still debate whether tea apprentices were trained in proper hand posture from childhood, or if most simply endured tendinitis in silence. You now understand why all the historical portraits of tea servants look vaguely haunted. You adjust your grip and recover. The foam stabilizes. It looks decent. Light green, no big bubbles, even coverage. You set the bowl down on the cloth and bow. Your master walks over, looks into the bowl, pauses. Passable, he says. You feel 10 feet tall. You want to thank him. You want to quit. But there's no time for emotions. Because now comes another silent horror, folding the furoshiki. This is a square cloth used for wrapping valuable objects, in this case the lidded tea jar you just prepped. The cloth itself is patterned with subtle waves, dyed with indigo, and so stiff with starch it practically folds itself. Except it doesn't. That's your job. You place the tea jar in the center and begin the wrapping technique known as musubi tsutsumi. The corners must cross just so, the knot must sit flat, and the final result must resemble a tidy parcel, not a frightened animal trapped in fabric. Your first try ends with a bulge on one side. You unwrap, refold. Now the corners are uneven. Third attempt, not too loose. The furoshiki begins to mock you with its silence. Finally, on the fourth try, you produce something that vaguely resembles competence. You tie the knot and lift the bundle, hands trembling with exhaustion. Your master gestures for you to place it on the shelf. You do so. It leans slightly. You adjust, then bow deeply. He stares for a moment. It'll do. You've now completed your morning prep. You've cleaned, folded, whisked, trimmed, and suffered. You've narrowly avoided setting yourself on fire and embarrassed only 3 or 4 major ancestral spirits. And just as you're about to shuffle back and breathe for the first time in an hour, a voice calls from outside the tea house. The guest is early. You freeze. There's a subtle rustle at the entrance, the unmistakable creak of wooden sandals on stone. A throat clears, politely but with an authority that travels through walls. The guest has arrived. Early. Of course. You glance toward your master, who doesn't look up from the scroll he's now studying with the intensity of someone deliberately not reacting. This is your problem, which is to say, this is your moment to ruin everything. You rush, without looking like you're rushing, to the entrance, remembering to pivot properly on your knees and keep your back straight, because heaven forbid you stumble like a commoner in front of the threshold. You slide open the outer shoji screen, and there he is. A samurai, mid-level, based on the condition of his scabbard and the modest crest on his kimono. His expression is the same weathered neutrality most samurai have perfected, somewhere between stoic dignity and I have opinions about sword maintenance. You bow, so deeply, so perfectly, that you can hear your spine debating whether this is worth the permanent damage. Welcome, honored guest, you say, careful to pitch your voice low and soft. Anything louder would be gauche. He nods once, steps in. You immediately slide the door closed behind him with a sound no louder than a whisper. He's already removing his sandals. You're already positioning the tray for them to sit on. This is the choreography now. No one claps. But no one stabs you either, so that's a win. You lead him along the stepping stones toward the tea room. He walks with absolute poise. You try to match his pace, but your legs, those traitorous noodles, are twitching from overuse. Every time your heel touches the ground, your knee sends a memo directly to your brain labeled mistake. The samurai enters the tea room first. You kneel by the threshold, bowing again. Not just to him, but to the spirits of hospitality, the gods of porcelain, and the entire lineage of tea masters past who might be watching from the void. He settles across from your master, and the air changes. It always does, when guest and host meet. A quiet thickens. Time seems to slow. The room, which only moments ago was filled with your frantic internal monologue, now holds the tension of ceremony. Each object, each breath, each glance matters. You shuffle to your corner, kneel in your usual station, and try to disappear into the scenery. Then you remember something awful. The incense. It was meant to finish burning just as the guest arrived. Not before, not after. The smell should have lingered gently, a final note of welcome in the sensory bouquet. But because he's early, the incense stick is only halfway done, and now a delicate curl of smoke is drifting directly into his face. You panic. You can't extinguish it. That would be even worse. You can't move it. That would break the sacred stillness. All you can do is will the smoke to go somewhere else with the power of shame and prayer. It doesn't work. The guest doesn't react outwardly. But you swear. He just squinted slightly, as if the incense is annoying, and you personally lit it that way to test his patience. Your master finally speaks. You honor this humble space with your presence. His voice is deep, even, measured syllables falling like pebbles into still water. The samurai responds with a phrase so polite, it may have been excavated from a 12th century poetry scroll. You don't fully understand it, but you nod anyway, as if your entire spirit agrees. And then your cue arrives. Time for the first formal bow. You pivot into position, slide forward, hands placed flat on the mat, fingers touching lightly. You press your forehead to the floorboards, hold for 3 seconds. Not 2, not 4, 3. You rise slowly. Your nose has lightly smudged the tatami. You panic again, this time internally. You shuffle back, praying the guest didn't notice. But there it is, that faintly raised eyebrow. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Historians still debate whether guests at tea ceremonies truly appreciated the aesthetics, or simply endured them out of samurai obligation. Judging by this man's face, it might be both. The master lifts the ladle, and now it begins. He performs each step like a slow-motion waterfall. Effortless, silent, inevitable. He warms the tea bowl. He wipes it. He spoons in the powder. Each movement has the weight of decades behind it. His pinky could probably serve tea with more grace than your entire existence. He adds water. The whisk enters the bowl, and you feel yourself sweating from 10 feet away because the froth is forming perfectly. It glows slightly, almost luminous in the soft light. The foam is dense but delicate, with no visible bubbles. This is the kind of matcha that makes monks weep and poets write about frogs leaping into ponds. Your master sets the bowl down in front of the guest, and now, your job again. You're to present the sweets. Known as wagashi, these tiny creations are not snacks. They are edible art, symbolizing the season, the mood, and occasionally the deep impermanence of all things. Today's sweet is shaped like a camellia bud, pink with a dusting of white, as if touched by morning frost. You carry it on a small black lacquered tray that reflects the room like a pool of ink. Your hands do not shake, or at least not enough to tip the tray. You present it. You bow. The guest receives it. The tray is returned, and then you realize your sleeve is stuck under your own knee. You gently wiggle it free. The guest doesn't notice, or pretends not to. You shuffle backward and lower yourself into the bowing position once again, feeling equal parts relief and nausea. The guest takes a bite of the wagashi, chews, swallows, nods. You exhale so slowly, it feels like your soul is deflating, and just when you think you might have a few seconds to breathe, the incense finally burns out. With a faint pop, the ember collapses, and now the room smells slightly like a burnt raisin. Of course it does. You don't move. No one does. The burnt raisin scent lingers like a ghost. You pray the guest finds it charming, maybe nostalgic. Maybe he once had a childhood friend who burned incense terribly, and this reminds him of simpler times. You try to believe that story because it's that, or cry into your sleeves. The guest remains perfectly composed, offering no clue to his thoughts. The master's expression is unreadable, though his left eyebrow twitches exactly once. An entire monologue, compressed into facial punctuation. He lifts the tea bowl. Carefully he rotates it, a quarter turn clockwise, before presenting it respectfully to the guest. This is tradition. The turn shows humility and avoids drinking from the most beautiful side of the bowl. It's part etiquette, part quiet aesthetic philosophy. The samurai receives the bowl. He bows softly. Then, at last, he raises the tea to his lips. You hold your breath, and then it happens. He slurps. Not by accident, not with embarrassment, but with intention, because this is how it's done. A proper tea guest slurps slightly at the end of their sip, a subtle, controlled sound that signals appreciation for the host's effort and the quality of the tea. A kind of edible applause. Historians still argue whether this slurp is a purely Japanese invention or an older Pan-Asian expression of gratitude. Either way, in this moment, it's the only thing standing between your master and a faint smile. The guest lowers the bowl, bows again, places it gently on the mat. You survive. Then your master gives the subtlest nod. Your cue. You approach, retrieve the bowl, fingers positioned precisely on either side, not touching the rim. You bow before picking it up, bow again after collecting it, then shuffle backward, keeping your eyes lowered. Your knees scream. Your back is a cobweb of regret, but you did it. You place the tea bowl on the cleaning cloth back in the prep area and begin the post-service wipe down. Not actual washing, heaven forbid. This is the gentle, reverent cleansing with a damp check-in. You treat the bowl like a sacred artifact recently exhumed. The guest, now finished with his wagashi and tea, folds his hands. A silence blooms. The master bows. The guest bows in return. You nearly bow again from your corner out of reflex, then stop yourself mid-lean, remembering your place. A bow from you now would suggest the ceremony is over, and it is not. Yet. Instead, you busy yourself with the tools, returning them to their positions with hushed respect. The natsume, its lid wiped. The shasin, rinsed and reset on its stand. Each motion echoes in your muscles like a whisper of pain. Then, just as the mood begins to soften, the guest speaks. It has been some time since I tasted such balance in bitterness. Your heart jumps. That's high praise. Your master responds. The tea only reveals what the guest brings with him. A response so steeped in Zen subtlety, you briefly forget which one of them you're supposed to be terrified of. The guest smiles. You blink. It's the first change in his facial expression all morning. He seems pleased. And now, with the formalities observed, you wait for the signal to begin the final closing steps. They come, as always, in silence. The master gently lifts the scroll from the tokonoma. He rolls it slowly, carefully, handling the paper like silk spun from thought. You're to follow next. You move towards the flower arrangement, today's small seasonal bundle, and bow before lifting it away. The plum blossom branch trembles in its vase. You steady it with both hands. You turn back and almost crash into your master. He says softly, "Leave it." You freeze. Leave the flowers. This is unexpected. The usual routine is to remove the arrangement so the room returns to neutral seasonal emptiness. But today, the flowers stay. Perhaps as a nod to the guest. Perhaps as a comment on impermanence. Perhaps he just liked the branch. Or maybe he didn't trust you to carry it without turning it into a plum-based disaster. You nod. Retreat. The ceremony has now entered its final breath. The quiet reverence before the bowing farewell. You sense the weight of completion settling in the air. Even the room seems to sigh. And then, as you kneel again, your knee slips, just slightly. Your foot nudges the edge of the tatami. You don't fall. You don't topple a vase or drop a tray, but your toe touches the seam, that sacred border you've been dodging all morning. You glance at your master. He's already looking at you. There's no anger in his face, no sigh, no disappointment, just tea. That is to say, serenity, a vast ocean of calm. Or maybe he's just extremely tired of your nonsense. You correct your posture. You lower your head. You remain very, very still. The guest begins to rise, slowly, carefully. He stands with all the grace of a man used to swords, war horses, and, most terrifying of all, sitting through 2-hour silent ceremonies without sneezing. He bows to your master, bows to the room, and then, in an act of unimaginable horror, turns toward you and nods. You have no idea what the correct response is. You bow, probably too low, possibly twice, and then, mercifully, he leaves. Your master exhales through his nose, not his mouth, because even exhaling must be tasteful. You are still on your knees, head bowed, hands clenched slightly from the sheer effort of holding it all together. He walks past you, stops at the doorway, says almost kindly, "Not bad." Then he adds, "For a servant who can't walk properly." You wait until he's gone before you allow yourself to slump forward onto your elbows, face half buried in your sleeve. And then, because of course, someone knocks gently on the outer screen. A second guest has arrived. Early again. You lift your head from your sleeve like a ghost being summoned. A second guest? Now? You haven't even reboiled the water or replaced the sweets. Your legs feel like someone filled them with wet rice. Your arms are vibrating from holding a tea bowl like it was a Fabergé egg. And your mind is currently running in safe mode, displaying only one message. Please wait. Ceremonial exhaustion loading, but you move. Because the only thing worse than disappointing your master is making a guest wait. That would be social death, which comes right before real death, if you're unlucky. You smooth your robes with a dignity you absolutely do not feel. Slide open the shoji screen. The guest outside is younger than the last, maybe mid-20s. His hakama is impeccable, but his posture says, "Just got yelled at by my superior," more than Zen tranquility. You bow. He bows. You bow again. He hesitates for half a second before stepping inside, likely unsure whether this is the right tea house. His eyes flicker over the garden stones, the low bamboo fence, the scent of fading incense. You try not to look winded. "This way," you murmur, bowing again. He follows you, more hesitantly than the first guest. You notice the slight drag of his foot as he tries to match your silent, sliding steps. He's probably never walked like this before. You feel a flash of compassion, then immediately stomp it down before it makes you friendly. You gesture toward the wash basin where he rinses his hands in silence. The motion is clumsy but sincere. You hand him a cloth to dry them with, then collect it the moment he finishes. Always 2 steps ahead, even when your brain is 6 steps behind. He removes his sandals, places them carefully on the tray. You guide him toward the tea room again, where the mats are still warm from the previous guest's presence. Inside, your master is waiting, kneeling as though he never moved. A single puff of steam escapes from the kettle's spout. The moment the second guest steps through the low entrance, the air changes again. Less formality this time, less gravity. There's a different rhythm forming, lighter, newer, almost cautious. And you're starting over. First, the bow. You lower yourself to the mat. Feel the old knee pain kick in like a memory. Your body makes a soft creak, which you pretend is the floorboards. You hold the bow. You rise. You glide to the prep area. Well, not glide so much as politely limp, and begin assembling the implements again. The tools are where they should be, mostly, but now the chasen looks tired. Same chasen, same. You rinse the bowl again, reposition the natsumi, the scoop, the cloths. The flower arrangement remains unchanged, a small mercy. The incense is gone. You decide not to replace it. Let the air be clean now, even if it smells faintly of burnt regrets. Then, as you're placing the lid back onto the kettle, you realize you forgot to restock the sweets. Panic. You bolt for the back kitchen. Well, bolt, meaning you slide slightly faster than usual and almost dislocate a hip. In the storage cabinet sits the box of wagashi prepared for today. There's a note beside it. For second guest, willow leaf and chestnut. You open the box. There they are, delicate as clouds, shaped like tiny leaves folded by a shy god. You arrange one on the tray, wipe the edge for good measure, and return to the room. Your master hasn't moved. The guest hasn't breathed. You present the sweet. This guest accepts it with a grateful nod. Less stiff than the last man, less accustomed to formality. He seems more focused on learning than judging. He nibbles the wagashi. His expression softens. You allow yourself half a breath. Then the tea. Once again, you sift the matcha. Just enough. A small green mound in the center of the bowl. You add water. You whisk. This time, the motion feels smoother. Your wrist, though tired, knows the rhythm now. The foam forms quickly. Bubbles fine. Color bright. Movement silent. It feels like progress. It feels like something. You present the bowl. The guest takes it, bows, turns it, and then, just as he lifts it, he sneezes. Oh no. It's not loud. It's not wet, but it's sudden, and the bowl shakes slightly in his hands. For a moment you see the entire ceremony unravel. Tea splashing, bowl cracking, dignity exploding into dust. But the guest recovers. No spill, no drop. He bows again. You bow so hard your vertebrae protest. He sips, and then, like the last guest, he slurps. It's louder than necessary. Not obnoxious, but earnest. Like someone trying to make sure they're doing it right. Your master's expression does not change, but something in his posture relaxes. The guest sets the bowl down. Very smooth, he says softly. Your master replies, "It is the water that did the work." They exchange nods. You retrieve the bowl, bowing and backing away, already wondering how much strength remains in your hands. You clean the bowl, fold the cloth, rewrap the scoop. Each gesture, though the same as before, now flows with less panic, more muscle memory. Even the chasen seems to sit more proudly on its stand, like, "Hey, we're doing it." You step back to your station. The guest shifts in place, clearly unsure of whether to speak again. Then he looks at you directly. You move, very quietly, he says. You blink. He's complimenting you. You. No one ever compliments the tea servant. Your master does not object. He simply says, "That is the goal." The guest bows. You bow. Your knee cracks. He hears it. You both pretend he didn't. And the ceremony continues. It's quiet now. The kind of quiet that's earned, not by accident, but by layers of respect, practiced stillness, and the kind of tired that feels noble instead of miserable. Your second guest has finished his tea. The empty bowl rests in front of him, the foam at the bottom beginning to settle into a faint green spiral, like the wake of a tiny storm. He bows. Your master bows. You bow. Again your knees complain. They're not even being subtle anymore. They're sending telegrams directly to your brain. We are no longer part of this organization. Please direct all complaints to the ankles. You rise just enough to shuffle forward and collect the empty bowl. You treat it like it's glowing, because in this room, it sort of is. Back at the prep space, you begin the silent ritual of cleaning again. Your fingers know the rhythm now. Left, right, press, wipe, turn, breathe. The chakin cloth is slightly damper than ideal. You fold it more tightly and try not to drip on the mat. The bowl is spotless. The whisk stands at attention. The scoop rests like a tiny crescent moon. From the corner of your eye, you see your master watching. Not critically, just aware, like a hawk who's impressed that the field mouse has lasted this long. You return to your kneeling position. Try not to groan as you lower yourself. For a moment, there's nothing else to do, so you simply breathe. And then the second guest does something strange. He asks a question. "May I see the chasen again?" Your head lifts slightly, not in surprise, because that would be impolite, but in thoughtful acknowledgement of unexpected request. Guests rarely ask questions during the formal part of a ceremony. It's not forbidden exactly, but it's like asking for a backstage tour during a ballet. You can do it, but it's bold. Your master tilts his head, then gives a subtle nod. You retrieve the chasen, carefully lift it from its stand, and place it on the black lacquered tray. You shuffle forward and offer it to the guest with both hands. He receives it the same way, delicately, reverently. He turns it in his fingers, studying the thin bamboo tines. "It's lighter than I thought," he murmurs. "Strength in the fine," your master says, as the pine tree bends in winter. You have no idea what that means, but it sounds correct. The guest bows. You retrieve the whisk. Return it to its stand. It feels oddly satisfying to give it the respect it never gets. Then it's time. The closing. You gather the tools, beginning the slow symbolic reset. The Natsumi is capped. The scoop is wiped once more. The bowl is turned. Nothing is rushed. The ritual is a soft descent, like gently drawing a curtain over the sun. And then you bring the kensui, the wastewater bowl, back into the prep room. You tip the used water into the basin. The soft splash is the loudest thing anyone's heard in minutes. You dry your hands on a cloth tucked into your sash. Now comes the final bow. Your master turns to the guest, says nothing, simply bows. The guest returns the gesture, slower this time. With deeper intent, you follow. 3 people, arranged like a triangle, folding toward the earth together. The guest rises, smooths his kimono. He bows once more before turning toward the door. You follow, staying several paces behind, not to hurry him, but to honor his path. At the entrance, he pauses. He steps into his sandals, then turns. "Thank you," he says. "Not to your master, but to you." You bow. "Thank you for your attention," you murmur, which is the ceremonial way of saying, "I see you saw everything I did wrong, and yet you drank the tea anyway, so thank you for not destroying me." He nods, then leaves. The door slides closed. And now, for the first time today, you're alone with your master in the tea room. He doesn't speak. He's returned to staring at the flower arrangement again. You think maybe he's considering finally letting you remove it. You kneel. Again. Of course. The sun is higher now. The light has shifted across the tatami in soft gold stripes. Somewhere outside, a cricket chirps in the garden. Then, without turning, your master speaks. You wiped the scoop incorrectly. Your stomach drops. You mentally replay every fold, every flick of the wrist. It felt correct. Maybe the angle, the timing, the pressure. "Yes, master," you say. He pauses, then adds, "But the tea was good." Your brain short-circuits. This is praise? You dare not respond. You simply bow. Then softly, "Would you like me to prepare for the next guest?" There is a silence. Then, "No. Rest your knees before you can't walk tomorrow." This is, undeniably, the kindest thing he has ever said to you. You bow again, deeper. Then rise, gingerly, slowly, like an ancient tortoise. Shuffle back into the mizuya, and sit down on the little wooden stool usually reserved for washing implements. You sigh, a deep, full-body sigh. The kind that only comes after you've survived both scalding water and social tension in the same 20 minutes. Historians still debate whether servants of the tea ceremony were truly respected members of the household or merely elegant shadows. But you feel like something in between. Your hands ache. Your feet are numb. Your face is hot from residual shame. And still, beneath it all, you feel almost proud. You didn't survive a day, you survived this day, even if your scoop wipe was a little off. It's amazing what the human body can endure when terrified. You sit on your tiny wooden stool in the back prep room, feeling every bone in your legs file formal complaints. Your left foot has decided to go numb for the foreseeable future. Your right one is throbbing in gentle protest. Your wrists ache from whisking tea with the delicacy of a calligraphy brush and the speed of a tiny bamboo hurricane. And still, you breathe. Because for now, briefly, there are no guests. The silence is deeper than any you've had all day. Not ceremonial silence, where everyone is watching each other for cues. Not judgmental silence, where you wonder if your robe is crooked. But actual, real, relaxing silence. Your shoulders begin to lower from their panicked perch beneath your ears. You glance toward the hearth. The kettle's still warm. A fine ribbon of steam rises from the spout, like the sigh of a ghost. The fire underneath crackles softly, content with its role in the performance. And then you realize something. You're thirsty. You, the person who's been serving tea to other people all morning, haven't had a single drop yourself. You glance toward the main room. Your master is no longer in view, likely retreating to his writing room or a quiet moment in the garden. You're alone, which means opportunity, a forbidden one, technically. Tea is not for the servant. You are here to serve, not indulge. But still, you reach for one of the plain bowls. Not the good one, just one of the unassuming practice bowls. The one with a tiny chip near the rim, shaped like a smile. You measure out the matcha, not too much, not too little. Add water, perfectly warm. Your hands move automatically now, finding the rhythm again. And you whisk. No pressure, no audience. Just a swirl of green turning to velvet. You lift the bowl. It's warm in your hands. Not burning, just comforting. You turn it a quarter clockwise, because habit is strong, and take a sip. It's bitter, earthy, smooth, like moss, if moss could hum. You exhale, and then nearly drop the bowl when a voice behind you says, "You forgot the cloth." You spin, slowly, because panic in the tea room must always move at half speed. It's your master. He's leaning in the doorway, one eyebrow slightly raised, the rest of his face unreadable. You bow instantly. He holds up a hand. "I know what you were doing." You bow deeper. "I apologize. It won't happen again." He walks in, glances at the bowl in your hands, looks around the prep area. "It's a good whisking," he says after a pause. "Better than this morning." You don't know whether to be flattered or terrified. He steps closer, reaches out, gently nudges the chasen stand a centimeter to the left. Then he says, almost to himself, "The cloth would have made it perfect," and walks out. You're left kneeling, bowl still in hand, heart pounding. You sip the rest quickly, not fast enough to be disrespectful, but definitely faster than serene sipping usually allows. You clean everything, twice. And just as you're folding the linen cloth, properly this time, a bell rings softly near the front of the house. You freeze. That bell only means one thing. A letter has arrived. You move to the gate. A young messenger waits, standing barefoot on the stone path, holding a scroll tied with green twine. He bows. "For the master," he says, voice clipped. You bow and receive it, retreating immediately. Back inside, your master accepts the scroll with a thoughtful grunt. He opens it, eyes scanning the neat brush strokes. Then he hands it to you. You read, "The daimyo wishes to schedule a tea visit. 1 week from today." You read it again. You glance at your master. He's already walking toward the flower shelf. A daimyo, a feudal lord, a man with power, armies, lands, and very particular expectations about how tea should taste and how ceilings should smell. You don't ask if you'll be involved. Of course you will be. You are the tea servant. which means you're about to spend the next 7 days preparing for a visit that might determine your master's reputation, your job security, and possibly whether this house keeps standing upright. Historians still argue whether tea ceremonies were ever used as political tests, subtle traps to test loyalty and composure. But judging by the way your master immediately begins inspecting the flower vases for chips, the answer seems to be yes. You take the scroll, store it in the lacquered case. Then you return to your station. The chasin needs to be restrung. The linen cloths need to be boiled. The hearth must be cleaned again. The day isn't over. In fact, a new one has just begun. And you haven't even replaced the incense yet. The incense shelf stares at you like it knows you messed up last time. You stand before it now, eyeing the little clay jars and lacquered boxes like a general inspecting troops before battle. Inside each one is a different scent: pine, sandalwood, plum blossom, one that might just be quiet disappointment in smoke form. For the daimyo's visit, it can't just be something pleasant. It must be symbolic, seasonal, and just obscure enough that it impresses without confusing. Something that lingers in the air like a well-composed haiku. You reach for the jar labeled Matsu no Kaori, the scent of pine needles. Earthy, grounding, humble, but ancient. Like something that smells faintly of winter and the memory of scrolls. You open the jar and immediately feel better. Maybe it's nostalgia, or just relief that this scent doesn't resemble roasted raisins. You select a fresh stick, uncracked and smooth, and place it in the special ceramic holder shaped like a miniature crane. Then you freeze, because one of your sleeves brushes the corner of the stand. The crane topples. You catch it, just barely, and now you're standing motionless, holding a fragile incense holder in both hands like it's a baby owl, with your heart trying to punch through your chest wall and file for early retirement. Your master doesn't see it. Thank every spirit of household peace. You gently reset the crane, light the stick, and this time, the smoke curls up into the air in a soft, dignified spiral. The pine scent drifts out like a mountain memory, and you whisper a silent apology to the room. Then you get back to work. Preparing for a daimyo is a bit like preparing for a thunderstorm, while knowing the storm is also bringing its own weather inspector. The list of duties multiplies. Every corner of the tea house must be examined. Tatami mats must be wiped with rice water and fluffed with a special broom made from foxgrass. The window slats are dusted with washi paper. The flower vases get checked for hairline cracks using candlelight. And you get to do all of it, while still attending to your daily tasks, while still waking at dawn, while still folding every cloth like you're wrapping a love letter to the gods of neatness. Your master says little, but the tempo of his movements quickens. He inspects everything twice, rearranges the same display 5 times. You catch him measuring the exact height of the kettle lid with a piece of twine. You're starting to suspect the daimyo doesn't actually drink tea. He just shows up to break people's minds. You polish the natsume, the tea caddy, with a piece of silk until it reflects your worried face back at you. You scrub the water ladle's bamboo handle with salt and vinegar to remove any oils, then dry it over a thread of twine strung above the hearth. The days begin to blend. You stop keeping track of hours. Time is now measured in cloths folded, tools cleaned, steps taken silently. You develop an uncanny ability to hear when the fire needs more charcoal just from how the kettle's size. And then one morning, your master gives you a small box. You open it. Inside, a new fukusa, a fine silk cloth, dyed a deep indigo, embroidered with an impossibly subtle wave pattern. It's a gift, or worse, a test. You will use this for the daimyo, he says. You bow deeply. You don't breathe until he walks away. This is no ordinary cloth. This one costs more than your entire monthly rice allowance. If you fold it wrong, touch it with wet fingers, or sneeze near it, it will bring dishonor upon your entire bloodline. Retroactively, you begin practicing, again and again, unfolding it, folding it, pressing the crease just so with your thumb's side, laying it flat on your lap without a single wrinkle, then snapping it open with one graceful flick, like a matador doing origami. It becomes your whole life for 2 days. Historians still argue whether fukusa folds had regional variations or were universalized by a single tea school. But in your case, the only variation is whether your panic fold looks slightly more or less like a deflated bat. And still, you improve. You even begin to enjoy it. There's something meditative about it once the terror subsides. The fabric is smooth beneath your fingers. The fold becomes a quiet poem. The motion becomes its own kind of prayer. You reach the end of the 4th day of preparation without breaking anything. You didn't burn a sleeve. You didn't trip over your own foot wraps. You only cried once, and that was entirely unrelated to tea. That night, your master sits in the garden, sipping his own tea. You bring him a fresh cup and kneel beside him. He doesn't speak. Then, after a long pause, he says, "The daimyo is known for noticing small things." You nod, not daring to ask which things count as small. A crooked whisk time, a slightly too steep bow, a poorly cut flower. He adds, "And for being quiet when displeased." You nod again, already feeling a nervous rash form across your soul. Then he says, "We will host him in the morning," and gets up. That's it. No grand pep talk. No encouraging, "You've got this." Just that one haunting sentence. You sit in the garden a little longer. The moon is out. Somewhere, a nightbird calls, and you realize your hands aren't shaking. Not right now. Maybe the nerves have moved deeper. Maybe, just maybe, you're ready. You wake before the sun. Not because of any bell or rooster or shouted command, but because your body simply knows. Today is different. Your blood stirs with that peculiar mix of fear and reverence that only comes from knowing a daimyo is about to walk through your humble sliding doors and judge you based on the quality of your tea whisking and incense selection. You rise from your mat, quietly. Your joints complain, but even they know to hush this morning. Outside, the sky is still the pale grey of unspoken thoughts. You make your way to the tea house. Every creak of the floorboard feeling too loud, every footstep a diplomatic risk. You slide open the shutters just enough to let in the soft pre-dawn light. The room is still, perfectly, unnervingly still. It smells of fresh tatami and pine smoke and anticipation. You kneel right in the center of the prep area and bow, not to anyone in particular, just to the space itself, to the spirits, to the moment, to the odds that you won't drop the tea bowl in front of a man with enough swords to fund a small rebellion. You start with the hearth. The fire must be perfect. Not too hot, never boiling, but warm enough to coax the water into soft, patient murmurs. The coals from last night are still faintly alive, so you feed them carefully with charcoal sticks arranged like a miniature shrine. They catch, a small victory. You wipe the ladle handle again, for luck. You recheck the tea caddy, even though you know it's fine. You refold the fukusa cloth 5 times, each crease cleaner than the last. You retie your sash, even though it was already straight. And you do it all in silence. The only sound is your own heartbeat, which currently resembles a taiko drum in a thunderstorm. Your master arrives just as the kettle begins to breathe. He says nothing. That's how you know you're not in trouble. He steps into the room, surveys it with a glance that lasts precisely 2 seconds, then disappears again. Probably to prepare the flower arrangement, or meditate for 45 minutes in front of a pebble. Either is equally likely. You do one final sweep of the room. There is not a speck of dust, not a crease out of place. Even the tokonoma, the little alcove where the scroll and flowers reside, feels more sacred than usual. Today's scroll bears a single kanji, mu, emptiness, nothingness, potential. Historians still argue whether this particular character was used to invite introspection or to warn guests to abandon expectations entirely. Either way, it feels appropriate. You certainly have no expectations other than to avoid fainting. The flower in the alcove today is a single stem of white camellia, simple, elegant, and, conveniently, not prone to sudden petal loss. You give it one final glance, then sit and wait. The moment arrives. You hear it first, the soft clop of sandals on stone, muffled by the garden's moss. Then the creak of the outer gate. You open the shoji screen and bow, and there he is, the daimyo. He is older than you imagined. His kimono is deep charcoal, embroidered with a family crest so understated you nearly miss it. His posture is ramrod straight. His gaze is unreadable. He says nothing. You bow lower. Welcome, my lord. He steps inside. You slide the door shut behind him without a sound. He removes his sandals. You present the tray. He places them down with the quiet precision of someone who expects the world to adjust to his rhythm, not the other way around. You lead him toward the tea room. His steps are soundless, his presence large. Not loud, never that, but large in the way that some mountains are large. The kind of presence that makes every corner of the room adjust itself instinctively. You kneel by the threshold, hold your bow longer than usual. Your master waits inside. He doesn't rise. He doesn't speak. The daimyo enters, and the air freezes. It's not fear, exactly. More like reverence magnified to the point of stillness. Your master bows. The daimyo returns the gesture. There is a pause. And then your cue arrives. You shuffle forward, silent as drifting fog, and perform the opening bow. You feel the fukusa tucked into your sash like a weighty secret. You rise. You move to the kettle. Check the heat. Perfect. The room watches without watching. No one moves. No one speaks. You reach for the natsume. Remove the lid with fingers trained to tremble after the ceremony, not during. You whisk the tea bowl. Add water. Stir. Each motion is deliberate. No extra flourishes. No drama. Just form. And inside that form, intention. You raise the bowl. Present it. Your master passes it to the daimyo himself. The lord accepts it. And then he closes his eyes. Just briefly. Then drinks. The slurp is so quiet it's almost imagined. You hold your breath. He sets the bowl down. A pause. Then the foam is alive. You blink. Is that a compliment? Your master inclines his head. The tea responded to good hands. You feel your ears grow hot. You bow deeply, face nearly touching the floor. And then the real test begins. Because now the daimyo sets the bowl aside, places his hands on his knees, and closes his eyes. Meditating. In the middle of your ceremony. Historians still argue whether this kind of silent interlude was planned, or whether guests simply took liberties based on rank. But one thing's certain. You do not interrupt a daimyo's meditation, not even to breathe louder. So you sit, and wait, and hope your knees don't explode from tension before enlightenment arrives. You don't know how long the silence lasts. It could be 5 minutes. It could be 50. Time is officially broken. The only way you measure it now is in kneecap pulses and the rising ache in your lower spine. The daimyo doesn't move, not even a twitch. He sits in perfect zazen posture, back straight, hands in his lap, eyes gently closed. His presence fills the room without making a sound, like a mountain pretending to be a person. You try to imitate the stillness, but your legs are on fire. Your nose itches. The fukusa tucked in your sash feels like it's been made of thorns. And your mind, your poor, overworked mind, is now screaming gently in 3-part harmony. Still, you wait. You were trained for this. Well, mostly. You weren't exactly trained for survive, surprise, spiritual detour during elite tea ceremony, but you can improvise. Your master doesn't move either. He sits across from the daimyo like a mirror. No expression, no impatience, just calm. You get the strange sense they've both done this before, maybe dozens of times. Finally, the daimyo exhales, softly, his eyes open, and he nods once, not to your master, to you. It takes everything you have not to blink in confusion. You lower your head in reply, as deeply and slowly as your vertebrae will allow. Then, without a word, the daimyo gestures toward the incense holder. You understand immediately. More. You rise, soundlessly, shuffle to the small, lacquered box at the edge of the room, and select a second incense stick. This time, ume no kaori, plum blossom, sweet, delicate, with a faint trace of rain-soaked bark. You light it from the hearth's flame. Place it gently in the holder. The smoke drifts upward like an idea being born. The daimyo closes his eyes again, just for a moment, then reopens them. He lifts the tea bowl once more, rotates it, sips, slurps, sets it down, and says, very softly, "This is the taste of snowfall on stone." You nearly collapse from the poetic pressure of the moment. But your master, of course, has a reply ready. Then may the spring bloom gently within. You wonder if that was rehearsed. It had to be rehearsed. The daimyo nods again, and the ceremony moves forward. You retrieve the bowl, fingers steady now, returning it to the cleaning area. Your movements feel smoother, grounded. There's a strange calm in your body now, like the silence soaked into your bones. You clean the chasen again, wipe the scoop, re-wrap the fukusa, all without a word. All under the gaze of a man who commands armies, and is apparently really into seasonal metaphors. The daimyo watches you work with the same attention he'd probably give a swordsmith or a calligraphy master. And for a brief moment, it hits you. You're not just a tea servant. You're a performer, a craftsman, a detail that, when done well, becomes invisible but vital. The room itself seems to glow in approval. The light is golden now, filtering through the paper screens in soft stripes. The tatami mats breathe beneath your knees. Even the kettle lets out a contented shh, like it's whispering that you did all right. Your master begins to speak. He tells a quiet story, something about a monk who once served tea to a fox disguised as a man. A fable, really. But the cadence of his voice is part of the performance now. Slow, soothing, almost musical. The daimyo listens, eyes half-lidded. Historians still argue whether these tea stories were spontaneous or selected from a kind of unspoken ritual catalogue. But this one feels personal, ancient, like it's been waiting years for someone to listen to it properly. You don't move, you just sit and absorb the tale like moss taking in mist. When the story ends, the daimyo smiles. It's so small you nearly miss it. And then, he speaks again. My father once held a ceremony like this before battle. He said the tea reminded him of stillness before thunder. He pauses. This is the same. You feel the words land in the room like petals. Not heavy, just precise. Your master bows. It is an honor. Then the guest shifts slightly, a subtle cue that the final phase has begun. You begin the closing rituals. Wipe, fold, return. The tools go back into their places. The incense fades into a sweet, smoky hush. You bring the bowl to the side, lay the cloth across your lap once more, and as you fold it for the final time, your hands move without hesitation. Each crease is perfect, each motion soft. There is no tremble. The ceremony ends, but no one says so. Instead, the silence becomes its own farewell. The daimyo rises slowly. You bring his sandals. He steps into them without a sound. At the door, he turns to you, not your master, to you, and says, "May your hands always know the quiet." Then, just as softly, and the cloth, you bow so deeply you see your own knees. and when you rise, he is gone. You slide the door shut behind him. Then you exhale, and for the first time all morning, you allow yourself a full breath. Your master stands, stretches his knees ever so slightly, and says, "You did well." Then he adds, "Better than last time." You blink. Last time, he walks past you. Let's just say the tea was crunchy. You stare after him. Crunchy? You don't want to know. Instead, you kneel by the kettle, let your hands rest on your thighs, and stare at the gentle steam rising upward. It smells faintly of plum and pine and pride, and it smells like survival. The ceremony is over. The house is quiet again. But it's a different kind of quiet now, not the brittle, breathless silence of anticipation. This is the soft, heavy hush that follows exertion, the kind of silence that settles in your shoulders, crawls into your sleeves, and whispers, "You lived." You begin the post-ceremony cleaning. Every tool must be reset, not just cleaned, because tea implements aren't just objects, they're characters in a play. And now that the performance is done, they each must be carefully guided off the stage and tucked into their dressing rooms. You begin with the bowl. It's still warm, faintly tinted green at the rim. You rinse it with fresh water, turning it in your hands like a moon in orbit. You dry it with the white cloth, gently, tracing the edge where the daimyo's lips had touched it. You set it on the stand, turning it exactly 15 degrees. Not because anyone will see, just because that's what it wants. Then, the chasen. You rinse the whisk, lifting it slowly from the bowl and watching the water fall from the tips like spring rain off bamboo leaves. You set it upright on its stand, allowing the tines to bloom back into their natural shape. It looks like a sea urchin made by a perfectionist. Then comes the scoop. You wipe it with the fukusa, carefully folding the cloth around the curved handle, brushing away the invisible powder. You fold the cloth closed, then open it again, slower this time, savoring the ritual now that your hands aren't being judged by a feudal overlord with strong opinions about foam. And finally, the natsumi, the tea caddy. You polish it with the silk cloth until it gleams like a black pearl. There's a tiny speck on the lid. You lift it to the light. It's a speck of ash from the incense. You wipe it away gently, like brushing sleep from a child's cheek. Each motion is a kind of closure. Each tool cleaned is a chapter ended. And yet, you're not hurrying. For the first time all day, you have nowhere urgent to be. No one is watching. You're just a person, folding cloth and polishing wood in a room that smells like pine and hot stone. Your master re-enters. He stands beside you for a moment, surveying your work. Then, unexpectedly, he kneels beside you and begins to dry the ladle. You freeze. He never helps. Not because he's cruel, but because he trusts you to do it alone. And also, possibly because he once said, "If I touch the implements too often, they will become arrogant." But today, he dries the ladle, wordlessly. You glance at him. He speaks without looking up. Your hands are steadier. You blink. "Thank you, master." "It wasn't praise," he says. You pause. "Oh," then he adds, "but it also wasn't not praise." You smile into your sleeve. You continue cleaning together. The hearth still breathes gently beneath the kettle. The light has shifted again, brighter now, sliding in through the slats in golden beams that cut across the tatami like brush strokes. And then, because no moment of peace is allowed to live for long, your master says, "We should try a different scroll next time." You nod, of course, because that's not a suggestion. That's a command disguised as a koan. He rises. "I'll be in the garden." You bow, and when he's gone, you sit back on your heels. You let yourself exist. Not as a servant, not as a shadow, just as a person who did something difficult. And then, because the gods have a sense of humor, you hear footsteps again. Another guest? You brace yourself, slide open the outer screen. It's a young girl, maybe 12, dressed in simple robes. She carries a small parcel in both hands. She bows. You bow. She straightens. "My mother sent this," she says, "for the tea master and his assistant." That pause. You clock it. She extends the parcel. You accept it. Inside, 2 sweet buns, still warm. You blink. She turns to go, then stops. "Was it true? The daimyo really came?" You nod. She blinks wide. "Did he bow?" You smile. "Twice," she gasps. "Even to the tea?" "Especially to the tea." She bows again, so deeply her braid swings forward and disappears down the garden path. You stand there a moment, holding the warm parcel in your palms, like it's made of silk and stardust. Then, carefully, you return to the tea room. You sit. You open the parcel. The buns are soft, sweet, still steaming. You eat one. It tastes like red bean and victory. You save the second for your master, not because he asked, but because you've shared something now, not just tea, but the quiet afterward, the space where things settle, and the soft hum of a kettle still warm. Later that afternoon, your master tells you to rest. You don't argue. You bow, gather your cloths, and retreat to the shaded walkway behind the tea room, where a wooden bench waits beneath a plum tree just beginning to blossom. You sit, stretch your legs with great ceremony, and let the sun touch your face like it's finally earned the right. Your knees creak. Your back groans. Your spirit, however, is humming softly, a low, steady buzz, like satisfaction with a sore throat. You close your eyes, and for the first time since the sun came up, you let your mind wander, not far, just enough. You replay the morning like a play you barely remember being in. The silence, the incense, the foam, the line about snowfall on stone. You chuckle, just once, remembering the crunchy tea story your master casually dropped like a stone into your mental lake. You make a mental note. Ask him what he meant by that. But not today. Today, you rest. A soft breeze rustles the branches overhead. A single plum blossom lets go and spirals down, landing in your lap. You stare at it. It's perfect. And completely unbothered by how many times you've folded cloth today. You're just about to doze when your master appears again. He doesn't say anything for a moment, just looks at the garden. Then, "Did you notice the guest didn't finish the second bowl?" You blink. "No, master. He left the last sip." This is, in tea language, a statement rich with implication. You sit up straighter. "Was it a mistake?" Your master shrugs. An action so rare you're briefly concerned the universe might fold in on itself. "Hard to say," he replies. "Some say the last sip should be left. Others say it must be finished." He pauses. Historians still argue about it. You smile faintly. "So it wasn't a failure?" Your master turns to you, eyes squinting in the sunlight. "If it was," he gave no sign. Then, as if swatting the topic away like a mosquito, he gestures toward the tools you'd left drying on the lacquer tray. "Come, we must prepare for tomorrow." You blink. "Tomorrow?" He looks at you as though you've asked whether fire is hot. "There's always another guest. That's the way of tea." "Right." You nod. You stand. Your legs, having briefly experienced freedom, object violently. One knee makes a sound that might legally qualify as a war crime. You pretend not to hear it. Back in the Mizuya, you reset everything. Again and again. It's strange. This constant return to zero. Each day, the same cloths are folded. The same scoop is polished. The same whisk is softened. But it doesn't feel like repetition. It feels like devotion. Like the ceremony is less about tea and more about the persistence of grace. You sweep the mat edges with a folded piece of linen, catching specks of dust no one would notice. You realign the scroll in the tokonoma, adjusting the hanging string by a millimeter. And then, you do something reckless. You suggest a flower. Your master raises an eyebrow. A red camellia, you offer. He doesn't say no. He doesn't say anything for an uncomfortably long time, then softly. Too bold. You nod. White, then. White, he repeats, is afraid of itself. You have no idea what that means. But he disappears and returns with a single sprig of violet. Use this. You bow, as if he's just handed you a treasure map. The flower goes in the vase. You trim it to the proper height, 7/5 the length of the vase, not an inch more. You set it in with a twist so subtle, only your fingertips feel it. It leans slightly, toward the scroll, almost like it's reading. Your master nods. Better. This is his highest form of praise. You go back to organizing the utensils, and then you pause. Because sitting on the edge of the prep tray is a wrapped package. You didn't put it there. It's small, square, neatly folded in dark paper. You look at your master. He's adjusting the shoji screen, not looking at you. You pick up the package, unwrap it. Inside, a small cloth-wrapped bundle. You open that, and find a new chakin, the wiping cloth. Fresh linen, crisp and uncreased, dyed in a faint shade of blue-grey. There's a tiny stitch in one corner, a single kanji, your name. You don't say anything, neither does he. But somehow, it's louder than anything either of you have said all day. You fold the cloth, place it gently in your kit, and prepare the tea one more time, this time just for yourself. Not for the daimyo, not for your master, just for you. You make the tea slowly this time, not because you're tired, although if exhaustion were an art form, you'd have earned a scroll of your own by now, but because there's no one watching, no titles in the room, no ancient expectations clinging to your shoulders, just steam and silence and a tea bowl that doesn't care who's kneeling in front of it. The kettle sighs, you listen, you measure out the matcha, just enough for one. You know the perfect amount now, not from theory, but from muscle memory, from mistakes made and burned into your fingertips. The scoop arcs through the air like a falling leaf. You whisk, gently. The rhythm is different when it's just for you. Slower, yes, but also looser. There's room for breath between motions. No performative grace. Just your hands. The bowl. The heat. The tea froths evenly. A soft green cloud in a wide blue sky. You sit. It's good. Not transcendent. Not legendary. But good. Solid. Earthy. Honest. Like everything today. You sit there a while, letting the warmth move through you like a slow tide. Your legs have gone numb, but in a comforting, familiar way, like they're reminding you they still exist, but have decided not to complain. Then you hear your name, softly, from the garden. You rise, eventually, and head outside. Your master is in the sand garden now, kneeling with a rake in hand. He gestures for you to join him. You do. Together, you rake in silence, lines in the sand, spiraling out from stone islands. Your rake makes a soft brushing sound, like someone whispering across a page. You're not very good at it. Your circles are uneven. Your lines waver near the edges. But your master doesn't correct you. He just keeps raking beside you, perfect spirals flowing like breath from his hands. Eventually, he stops. You see the crooked line, he asks, pointing toward one of your less successful efforts. You nod, already tensing for correction. Leave it, he says. You look at him. Why? Because it's true, he replies. The stone is crooked. The path is crooked. Why should the sand lie? You stare at your own mistake, now officially sanctioned into existence. Thank you, you say quietly. He nods. A few moments pass. Then he adds, most people chase perfect circles their whole lives and miss the rock completely. You file that away somewhere in your soul. He stands, hands you the rake. You finish. And just like that, he's gone. You kneel again. rake in hand. This time, you work slower, not to impress, not to fix, just to follow the curve of the path that already exists. Later, you return to the tea house. It's empty, clean, peaceful, but it smells faintly of footsteps and still carries the echo of the daimyo's silent gaze. You place a fresh incense stick in the crane holder, this time koboku, sinking wood, rare, deep, almost smoky, like the memory of a campfire 3 nights old. You light it, watch the smoke climb. You remember everything your master said today, and everything he didn't. You remember the gift of the chakin, your name embroidered in thread barely visible. You remember the line in the sand, the crooked one, and how it made more sense than any perfect spiral ever could. The tea tools are dry now. You take each one, wrap them in soft cloth, and place them back in their boxes. The sound of a lid sliding shut is, strangely, one of the most satisfying sounds you've come to know. There's comfort in the closures. You bow to the room before you leave, not because anyone's watching, but because you're not the same person who first stepped into it this morning. Outside, the sun has begun to tilt low. The day is folding itself up, neatly, quietly. The tea house sighs behind you, and you somehow are smiling. You sleep that night like a stone in the river, still, heavy, unmoving. Not even the temple bell stirs you. Not the neighbour's rooster who famously doesn't understand time. Not the wind, which rattles the paper screens just enough to suggest ghosts are curious about your new status. But you don't move. Your body has declared a holiday from existence, and your mind, surprisingly, agrees. When you do wake, it's late. The sun is already up. The world is already in motion. Somewhere in the house, someone is hammering something that definitely sounds like it shouldn't be hammered. But you lie there anyway, just breathing. Eventually, you rise. You shuffle into the courtyard where your master is, sweeping the roof. You blink. He notices you, offers a casual wave with a pine needle broom, and says, "You're late." You nod. You are. Gloriously so. You're also no longer the only servant who overslept. You tilt your head. He gestures toward the garden. There's a boy there, maybe 11. He's holding a whisk upside down and squinting at a tea bowl like it might whisper the secrets of the universe. He arrived this morning, your master says. His family owes a favor. I've decided to let him repay it in bruised knees and boiled water. You're surprised. Not just because you now outrank someone, but because you weren't expecting anyone to ever join you in your small world of cloth folding and poetic judgment. You bow toward the boy. He bows too, badly. You wince. Your spine tenses in vicarious shame. Don't correct him, your master mutters. I want to see how many wrong things he can do before he asks a question. This is definitely a test, for both of you. The boy eventually breaks something, a whisk stand, thankfully not one of the good ones. You hear the snap, followed by a panicked gasp, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone trying to hide evidence behind a flower pot. Your master sighs and disappears into the house. You approach. The boy is frozen mid-guilt, hands behind his back, trying to become one with the air. You kneel beside him. Quietly, without accusation, you retrieve the broken pieces. He looks at you, wide-eyed. You don't scold him. Instead, you whisper, "Use the one with the chip in it next time. It's less noticeable." He blinks. You're not mad. You glance at the clay slivers in your palm. "It's not the worst thing I've seen break this week." He relaxes. Then shyly, he asks, "Was it true? The daimyo came?" You nod. "Did you serve him?" You nod again. He leans in, whispering as if the very question is forbidden. "Was he scary?" You think for a moment. "No," you say. "He was quiet, and so was I, and we understood each other." The boy seems impressed. "Can I learn too?" he asks. You nod again, and this time, when he bows, It's a little better. Later, your master watches you instruct the boy on how to hold the ladle without looking like he's going to fling water across the room. You demonstrate the turn of the wrist, the slight lift, the way the elbow leads and not the fingers. Your master doesn't interrupt. When the boy nearly drops the ladle, you stop him gently and correct the angle. His second attempt is better. You're patient, your master says. You glance at him. Is that praise or observation? He shrugs, then adds, he reminds me of you. You stare at the boy. He's clumsy, awkward, eager, trying too hard to look like he isn't trying. Spring creeps in quietly, like a cat pretending not to care. It begins with warmth in the breeze, a little more sunlight between the slats. One stubborn cherry blossom appearing too early on the branch outside your sleeping mat. Then, before you've fully realized it, the garden explodes. Blossoms everywhere, petals on the roof, on the water basin, in your shoes, in the kettle somehow. The entire teahouse seems suddenly lighter, like the building itself sighed after a long winter. And with the flowers comes pressure. Because spring, as your master reminds you daily, and with increasing flair, is the season of demonstration. The time when tea practitioners gather from all over the region, with their cleanest robes, sharpest opinions, and most judgmental elbows, to observe. Observe each other, observe the tea, and silently judge everything, especially the folding of fukusa cloths. So of course, you're terrified. You've been given your slot on the third day of the demonstration. A safe position, your master says. No longer the warm-up act, not yet the finale. Enough attention to matter, but not enough to destroy you publicly. Comforting. The demonstration will be hosted at a larger tea estate. You've seen the place once, years ago. Immaculate rock gardens, a stream that politely refuses to babble too loudly, and walls that seem to repel dust by sheer ancestral willpower. You'll be travelling with your master. And the boy. He's still calling the scoop a teaspoon, but his bow is now passable, and he stopped holding the whisk like it owes him money. Progress. You spend the days before departure cleaning your tools like they're going to be auditioning for a shrine. Every cloth is checked, every bamboo item inspected for splits. You rewrap your bundle of implements 3 times before it even leaves the house. And your master, he's distant. Not cruel, just quiet, focused. You catch him testing the heat of a new brazier with the back of his hand, then rechecking the curvature of a tea scoop he carved 30 years ago. It's not nerves, it's reverence. Because this isn't a competition, it's a showing, and showing something honest, something deeply, quietly crafted, means offering up a piece of yourself. No armor, just a bowl, a cloth. A moment. Historians still argue whether tea demonstrations in this era were closer to religious rituals or unspoken contests of subtlety. But one thing is certain, nobody showed up without caring. The night before the trip, you prepare the travel trunk. It's small, lacquered, worn smooth at the corners from decades of service. Inside, your implements nestle together like an oddly spiritual lunchbox. Your new chakin, the linen cloth with your name stitched in blue, goes in last. You pause before you fold it, then do so slowly, carefully. You tie the trunk shut and go to sleep knowing you will likely dream of folding cloth endlessly into the void. The journey begins at dawn. You walk, 3 hours through low hills and whispering fields. The road is quiet, save for the boy occasionally tripping on his own feet and your master's occasional grumbles about weak sunlight. You arrive at the estate just as the gates open. It's larger than you remembered. Servants guide you to your lodging, a narrow guest wing with soft floors and sharp angles. Everything smells faintly of camellia blossoms and rice straw. Your master disappears almost immediately. To greet the elders, he mutters, which you suspect means to argue over scroll selections and seasonal incense. You and the boy unpack the tools. You do it in silence. But it's a good silence, like you're tuning an instrument together. Then you're summoned. Tomorrow is your demonstration, but today is the viewing. Each tea house is allowed to watch 1 or 2 ceremonies from other practitioners. You take notes, not literal ones, but quiet mental observations as you sit on your heels and try not to blink too loudly. The first host is meticulous, every motion flawless, but cold. You admire the precision, yet somehow feel like you've just watched a master chef cook a perfect meal without tasting it. The second host is gentler. He smiles at his guest, wobbles slightly during the whisking, says something humble when he spills a drop. His cloth folds are slower, but the room feels better. It reminds you of your own training and the crooked rake lines. Later, your master finds you in the corridor, sitting beneath a hanging scroll that reads, Ichigo Ichie. One time, one meeting. He sits beside you. Do you know what you'll do tomorrow? He asks. You nod. I mean, no, not recite. You take a long breath. Yes. He doesn't reply, just sits with you until the breeze passes. Then he says, remember, they're not here to see perfection. They're here to see presence. You nod again, and this time you feel it in your spine. That night, you sleep little. Not because of fear, but because the anticipation is calm now, like the surface of a kettle just before it whispers. And in the quiet hours, as you lie on your mat listening to the wind against the shutters, you don't feel alone. You feel ready. Morning arrives not with a jolt, but with a breath, a long, slow, aware breath. You sit up in the stillness before dawn, your body moving on its own, like a seasoned actor before curtain. The air smells of tatami, old wood, and anticipation. A servant leaves your breakfast by the door. You thank them, then forget to eat it. You dress carefully. This robe is simple but formal. Deep indigo, soft cotton, with sleeves just wide enough to look intentional. You tie the sash slowly, then untie it, then retie it again, because symmetry, today of all days, is not optional. You tuck your fukusa into your obi, then you pause. Your hand rests on your chakin, the tea cloth with your name stitched into the corner. You take a breath. You place it in the case. You tie the bundle closed. Every knot today is ceremonial, even this one. Then, bundle in hand, you make your way through the estate. The walk to the demonstration house is lined with gravel. It crunches softly beneath your feet. You pass other guests, some performers, some observers, each moving with that same unspoken gravity. No chatter, no pretense, just people carrying their tools and their nerves like folded paper. You arrive. The house is a marvel, cedar and pine beams, paper screens already glowing with the light of a perfect spring morning. The room you'll serve in opens onto a garden so manicured it feels like a painting caught mid-breath. There's a crane-shaped basin trickling water, a flowering pear tree. You bow as you enter the room. No one is here yet. Good. This moment is yours. You place your bundle beside the hearth. Unwrap it. Each tool breathes again in the light. You arrange them, not just by placement, by intention. The scoop leans slightly toward the caddy. The whisk sits upright like a pine tree braving wind. Your fukusa rests folded in half, as though it too is pausing to center itself. Your master appears. He doesn't say anything. He kneels beside you, adjusts the water ladle by exactly 1 finger's width, and nods. Then he vanishes, because today it's your room. Your guest enters just after the light crosses the tatami scene. You bow low. They bow lower. This is a visiting teacher from the southern school, a quiet man with tired eyes and a posture that says, I've served tea on worse days. You welcome him with the practiced calm of someone who has spent months folding things and whispering apologies to inanimate objects. The ceremony begins. You move, and everything disappears. You no longer think about hands or cloths or elbow angles. You just move. The fire is already burning. The water is already heating. You kneel, bow, present the utensils. The motions are in your bones now. Each one lands with the quiet certainty of rain on stone. You open the natsume, scoop the tea. The bowl is warm in your hands. You whisk, and in that gentle motion, back and forth, then slow circles, you find the day. The guest watches, not judging, just receiving. You place the bowl before him with steady hands. He bows. You bow. He lifts. He sips. The slurp is soft. And he smiles. There it is. The moment. Not glory. Not triumph. Just presence. The two of you breathe the same air. Share the same stillness. No words needed. When he returns the bowl, your fingers brush the rim briefly, and you realize the foam is perfect. You clean the tools with the same quiet focus. Dry the scoop. Wipe the whisk. Return each item to its place. And then the closing bow, both of you still, held in silence, like tea held in a cup just before it cools. The guest rises and pauses. He says softly, the tea was humble, then more softly still. So you must be proud. You bow, deeper than before. Then you remain kneeling long after he's gone, because that moment is still unfurling inside you, like steam from a fresh cup. Your master enters again. He surveys the room. You didn't ruin it, he says. You smile. I almost smiled, he adds. That's how I knew it went well. You begin to pack the tools, but he stops you. Leave them. Let the room breathe. You step outside with him. There's a breeze now, stirring the blossoms. You both stand there a while, saying nothing. Then he says, tomorrow, you'll show the boy how to prepare the ash bed for the hearth. You blink. He's ready. No, your master says. But you are. That night, back in the guest quarters, you sit with the boy. He listens, wide-eyed, as you describe the demonstration. You leave out the slurp, but you describe the steam, the bowl, the silence, and when he asks, were you scared? You pause, then say, only before it began. And when he asks, did you make a mistake? You smile, only the kind that made it better. He seems confused, which is the perfect answer. You sleep with your chakin under your pillow, not because you're sentimental, but because something about this cloth, this day and this moment still feels like it's unfolding, and you want to carry it just a little further into your dreams. The morning after the demonstration is what your master calls a maintenance day. He says it with the same tone one might use for dental surgery or sweeping snow uphill. You know what's coming. Everything has to be scrubbed, wiped, sun-dried, re-oiled and re-wrapped. Every implement, no matter how lightly used, must be restored to its purest state, because if something as small as a whisk grows even slightly out of shape, it will remember, and it will fail you. You begin in the mizuya, the preparation area behind the tea room. The air is thick with morning light, and the faint metallic smell of boiled water and lacquer. The whisk stands are laid out like tiny soldiers awaiting polishing. The scoop cradles rest in rows. The tea bowls are gently stacked, not touching, of course, because ceramic has a social anxiety complex. You start with the bowls. You check for hairline cracks using your thumbnail and a steady hum. If it rings clear, it's safe. If it buzzes or thuds, it's banished. Next, the chasen. These are the delicate bamboo whisks that somehow cost as much as a decent coat. You soak them briefly, then let them stand upright in the sun to breathe and re-bloom. The sun is warm on your sleeves. You find yourself quietly humming a song you haven't thought about in years, something your grandmother used to sing while scrubbing vegetables. The rhythm matches the gentle cleaning strokes. The boy watches you work, wide-eyed. You hand him a bowl and say, your turn. He takes it, reverently, holds it like it's a sacred scroll, then promptly drops the cloth in it. You don't scold him, you just say, again. He tries again, better. Now the scoop, you say, handing him the bamboo ladle. He blinks, but it's clean. You raise an eyebrow. Is it respectful? He stares at it, then begins wiping. Maintenance isn't punishment, it's reverence. And slowly, the boy begins to understand. Your master enters, carrying an old brush and a tin of ash. We're resetting the hearth, he announces. You follow him to the tea room. The hearth is still faintly warm from the day before. You and your master kneel before it, like surgeons preparing for an operation. He lifts out the kettle with a pair of iron tongs, revealing the ash bed beneath, grey, swirled, and cratered from use. Time to rake the garden, he mutters. The boy watches, confused. But you know, the ash bed must be re-levelled, its centre scooped out, the walls gently built back up around it like the banks of a very sleepy volcano. Then, using the curved brush, you spiral the surface outward in a pattern so subtle, it feels like a dream being combed into sand. You hand the boy the brush. He hesitates, then begins to draw. His spirals are wild. One looks like a snail in distress, another like a snake having regrets. Your master nods anyway. Let it be crooked. You smile. The callback warms your chest. You finish the maintenance in the late afternoon. The tools are restored. The hearth is renewed. The kettle hums gently again, like a dragon pretending to be asleep. Your master surveys the room. It is good, he says. Then, suddenly, it is too good. You blink. He lifts the incense holder, swaps out the plum blossom stick for one of sandalwood. Plum is for guests, he says. Sandalwood is for us. It's the first time he's included you in us. You sit together, all three of you, master, student, and boy. No guests, no titles, just tea. You prepare it slowly, with a cloth that's no longer stiff, a bowl that's familiar, a whisk that knows your rhythm now. You serve. The boy watches everything, eyes darting. He slurps, a little too loud, but earnest. Your master drinks and says, "It tastes like maintenance." You laugh, and he adds, "That's not an insult." You clean the tools without being told. You fold the fukusa in your lap, and for the first time, it feels less like a task and more like punctuation. The ceremony is never just about performance. It's also about repair, renewal, what happens after the curtain falls, when the guest leaves, when no one is watching. That's the secret of Maintenance Day, not routine, but restoration. You find the boy later sitting outside in the fading light, trying to fold his own cloth. It's hopeless, a crumpled red triangle of despair. You kneel beside him, and without speaking, fold it once, then again. He follows your hands, one more fold, and it rests, still. Software complete. The rainy season begins without warning. Just a low sky, a sigh of damp wind, and then a quiet, persistent drizzle that doesn't stop for 3 days. The tea house shifts with it. Everything softens. The air thickens. The tatami smells richer somehow. Even the birds outside seem to trade their chirps for whispered suggestions, and with the rain comes a new rhythm. Gone are the bright ceremonies, the travelling guests, the bustling demonstrations. Now it's the season of inwardness, of tea prepared for no audience but the rain itself. The ladle clinks more gently. The kettle steams instead of sings. Your master says, "Now is when tea is truly tested." You nod, but don't press for an explanation. You've learned by now, he rarely means a literal test. More often, it's a test of patience, of heart, of silence. The boy struggles with it. He keeps wanting to do things, rearranging implements, practicing scoops, refolding the fukusa so many times you're afraid the cloth might sue for harassment. "Stop," you finally say one afternoon. "Just be in the room." He blinks. "But we're not making tea." You smile. "We're letting the tea settle into us." He squints like you've spoken in bird language, but he stops fidgeting and just sits. The rain taps on the wooden frame. You listen together. Your master gives fewer instructions now. He lets the room speak. You begin to recognize the shifts in his silences, the tiny approval hum he makes when your hand moves just right. the micro-sigh when you forget to bow to the water ladle. And then, one afternoon, he tells you a story. He never tells stories. You're polishing the ladle when he speaks from the doorway. Once, he begins, I served tea to a man who had just returned from war. You pause. He sat like a statue, said nothing, drank everything. He steps inside, eyes on the empty hearth. After the ceremony, I asked if he wanted a second bowl. He said no, said he was full. From the tea, from the silence, you nod, waiting. He gave me nothing, your master says. No compliment, no criticism, just silence. A pause. Years later, I met his son. The old man had died, but the son told me his father only ever spoke of one tea ceremony, said it was the only moment in his life he didn't feel watched. Your master turns to you. Do you understand what that means? You nod again. You think you do. It's not about the tea, he says. It never was. The rainy days continue. You teach the boy how to set the charcoal, slowly, reverently, as though building a temple from twigs. He watches you fold the white cloth over your fingers, then mimics it perfectly the third time. You reward him with a nod. He beams. It feels strange now to think back to when you first arrived, to that first morning of ash dust, clumsy boughs, and your master watching you like a hawk watching a blind duckling. You remember fumbling the whisk, forgetting which hand held which cloth. You remember your master's sharp, dry voice, the way he once said, try not to make the tea apologize for existing. And now you lead the warm-up ceremonies. You serve practice tea to the boy. You correct his posture. You remind him not to grip the scoop like he's afraid it might run off. Your master watches from the porch, sipping his own bowl slowly. You're not perfect, he says, but you're no longer embarrassing. It's almost a compliment. Sometimes, when it's just you in the room, you prepare tea for the rain. You leave the screens half open, let the mist creep in. The garden soaks quietly. The stone lantern glistens. The little pond reflects the grey sky like a sheet of silver paper. You move slowly, no one watching, and yet you bow just the same. There's peace in that, in knowing that ceremony isn't performance, it's presence. One evening, the rain lifts, just for a while. The sunset breaks through like a silent drum beat, painting the walls in gold and pink. Your master joins you by the hearth, no words exchanged. You both drink tea. You don't need to ask if it's good. You just sit in the last light of day, holding warmth between your palms, breathing in sandalwood and steam, and letting the quiet wrap around you like a second robe. The boy falls asleep mid-fold on his mat. You cover him with your extra cloth. The hearth crackles once. Your master leans back. You're almost ready, he says. You don't ask for what. You just listen to the night, and let it say nothing at all. You wake the next morning with a strange sensation, like you've stepped over an invisible threshold in your sleep. Nothing in the room is different. The hearth still glows faintly with last night's charcoal. The scroll still hangs, gently waving in a current of wind too subtle to feel. The boy is still drooling on his sleeve. But you feel still. Not like before, when stillness meant hesitation. This is different. This is the stillness of something complete, or close to it. Your master calls for you. You bow as you enter the room, but he waves it away. No time for that, he mutters, beckoning you to follow. You walk together through the rear corridor of the estate, past the tool room, past the storage shelves, and out into a quiet part of the garden where the moss grows thick and undisturbed. There's a small, half-forgotten structure here. You've never seen it used. The door creaks as he opens it. Inside, dust hangs in the light like suspended breath. He gestures. Clean it. You blink. Now? Yes, he says, handing you a broom. You'll need it tomorrow. It takes you the rest of the day to understand what it is. Because later, once the dust has been vanquished and the window screens realigned, Your master returns with something wrapped in a long silk cloth. He kneels, unwraps it, and reveals a tea scoop, hand-carved, polished, worn smooth at the thumb rest, and along its shaft, a name burned into the wood with careful strokes. Quiet Pine. He places it on the tatami between you. This is yours now, he says. You don't reach for it, not yet. Are you sure? You ask. He doesn't answer with words, just nods once. You pick it up. It's light, but it carries weight. You hold it like a memory or a promise. He continues. You'll serve your first guest alone tomorrow. This room will be yours. The tools, your own. The decision, yours. You feel the weight in your chest settle somewhere below your ribs. You bow, deeper than usual, because this isn't training anymore. This is trust. He leaves without another word. That night, you polish every tool as if it's never been touched. You fold the cloths so perfectly that geometry itself would struggle to improve them. The boy sits nearby, watching with the reverence of someone watching a monk sculpt clouds. Will I get a scoop? He asks, wide-eyed. You nod. One day. What will yours be called? You pause, then look at the scoop again. Quiet Pine, you say. He tilts his head. Why? You run a thumb along its smooth edge. Because it waits, you whisper, and it listens. He doesn't understand, but he nods anyway. The morning arrives quiet and clean. The rain has passed. The world smells rinsed. Your guest is not a daimyo, not a tea elder, not a critic with folded arms and sharp eyebrows. It's a monk, an old one, barefoot. He smiles as he enters the room, says nothing. You bow, he bows, he sits, and you begin. The motions feel both brand new and impossibly familiar. You move with care, not for the guest, but for the moment. The kettle is slower to heat in this new hearth, and the bamboo ladle creaks slightly with each dip. You let it. The tea bowl you chose is one with a tiny chip on the base, flawed but honest. It cradles the matcha like a secret. You whisk gently. The monk watches with the stillness of a stone that has forgotten how to move. You offer the bowl. He drinks. You clean the tools. He says softly, I once drank tea with your master. He was silent for 17 minutes. You smile. That sounds about right. The monk bows. Your silence is younger, he says, but no less clear. You bow in return. The ceremony ends. He rises, says only, thank you for the listening, then disappears into the garden path like fog into leaves. You remain in the room for a long time, sitting, letting the silence ring. Later, your master returns. He stands in the doorway, looks at the hearth. You burn the charcoal too low, he says. You nod. He shrugs. Still, the tea tasted complete. That evening, as you clean the tools, you place the Quiet Pine scoop back in its silk wrap. You smooth the cloth, tie the knot, and without realizing it, exhale. The kind of exhale that means, I made something real today. The summer heat creeps in like a lazy cat with a grudge. The air thickens. The garden starts to buzz with unseen insects. Even the moss looks sweaty. And inside the tea house, everything that once felt meditative now feels like it's stuck to your skin. You learn a new phrase from your master this week. Natsubate, summer fatigue, a condition well documented in Japan for centuries. It is not a disease, he says, but a kind of slow-motion despair that settles in your bones when the humidity climbs higher than your spirit. You feel it in your sleeves. Even the tea water seems slower to boil. Still, the ceremonies continue. Only now they shift. In summer, the tools are lighter, the rhythms even slower, the colours cooler. The hearth is moved away from the sun's reach, and the bamboo ladle sweats in your hands if you grip it too long. You swap thick bowls for thinner ones, earthy brown glazes for pale celadon, heat for breath. Your master shows you how to whisk more gently in the heat. More froth means more air, he says, and air is the only thing keeping us alive right now. The boy, ever enthusiastic, faints during his third attempt at folding cloth while kneeling in direct sunlight. You carry him into the shade and pour water on his head. He revives, sputters, and asks if he's allowed to resume. You say, only if you promise not to melt again. He promises, then melts again, emotionally, after realizing he dropped the scoop. You begin using a fan during ceremony prep, not for show, but out of raw survival instinct. The kind made of woven paper and bamboo ribs, the kind that feels like it barely moves the air, but reminds you that movement exists. Your master insists the fan is part of the training. Only when the heat is oppressive do you learn restraint, he says. Can I learn restraint in winter? You ask. He ignores you. The summer also brings a new guest. A woman this time, dressed in travel robes, with a walking staff and a single silver ring on her smallest finger. She's a tea scholar, your master explains, here to observe your work. You blink. You told someone about me? No, he replies, but the garden did. You don't ask. She watches quietly as you perform the ceremony. She doesn't speak, doesn't flinch, doesn't blink, possibly. Only when the bowl is returned and the cleaning cloth is folded again into silence does she offer a single comment. Your hands are careful. It feels more valuable than any scroll. After she leaves, your master tells you she wrote a book once, on whisk patterns. You ask, is there really a whole book on whisk patterns? He says, 2 volumes. You believe him. The boy starts practicing nighttime ceremonies. He insists he performs better under moonlight. You suspect he just likes an excuse to stay awake. You let him serve you once in the garden after dusk. His tea is a little too strong, his whisking too eager, but he bows deeply and means it. You'll be good, you say afterward. He shrugs. I just want to be honest. You smile. Then you're already good. He goes to sleep with his fukusa folded under his head like a pillow. Later that night, your master sits with you beneath the eaves. He hands you a bowl. It's old, older than the house. Crackled glaze, one chipped edge. This was my teacher's, he says. You hold it. Why are you giving it to me? I'm not, he replies. I'm letting you learn its weight. The bowl is heavier than it looks. You place it down gently, like setting a memory on a shelf. He says nothing else that night. The next morning, you prepare summer tea alone. The humidity thickens as the water boils. A cicada screams in the garden. Sweat dots your brow, but your movements are clean. Your grip light. Your breath slow. You serve the tea to no one, and yet the room feels full. The air holds the ceremony like it's listening. The tea is pale green, cool on the lips. It tastes like presents. It tastes like summer trying not to be summer. The fireflies arrive without announcement. One evening, you're sipping cool barley tea outside the tea house, and then, there they are. Dozens of tiny glowing souls, blinking in and out of existence across the dark garden like little monks practicing impermanence. The boy nearly falls into the koi pond chasing one. You rescue him by the collar and remind him that dignity is still expected after sunset. Fireflies mean one thing. Obon is coming. Obon, Japan's festival of the dead. A time when families gather, lanterns are hung, and spirits are said to return for a visit. Even your tea house, normally a bastion of mossy indifference, gets a little swept up in the energy. Your master unpacks an old scroll featuring brushstrokes so faint they seem to hover just above the paper. He hangs it silently. You don't need to ask. The phrase written on it, mono no aware, the sadness and beauty of things passing. You feel it in your chest. Because Obon isn't just about reverence for the dead, it's about acknowledgement that even cups break, even masters grow quiet. Even this moment, so full of light and breath, will one day fade. The ceremonies shift accordingly. Even the tea tastes different. Lighter, quieter. There's a tradition, rarely discussed, where certain hosts use water drawn just after midnight during Obon, believing it holds a cooler, gentler spirit. Your master does not confirm nor deny this practice. He just sends you to the well after the moon rises, hands you a wooden pail, and says, "Take your time." You do. The garden at night is alive in a different way. The fireflies linger, the trees breathe, and for a moment, you feel like you're walking through a memory that hasn't happened yet. When you return, the water is used immediately, not for guests, but for us. Your master prepares the tea himself. He serves the boy first, then you. Then finally, he lifts his own bowl and whispers something into the steam before sipping. You don't ask what. He doesn't explain. Later, he shows you a box. It's wrapped in cloth, bound with twine, clearly unopened in years. He unties it slowly, reverently. Inside is a tea scoop. It's beautiful, smooth and warm with age, curved at the end like a question mark that gave up trying to know the answer. "This," he says, "was my teacher's." You nod, already feeling the gravity of it. "I used it only once," he continues, "the night he died." You look at him. His face doesn't change, but his hands rest a little heavier on the box. You bow deeply and say nothing, because sometimes silence is the only right reply. The next evening, a small lantern ceremony is held in the village. The boy begs to go. Your master grumbles, but ultimately nods. You accompany him. The streets are lined with light. Small white lanterns drift down the stream like glowing petals. Somewhere, a network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Retry. You said, continue. ChatGPT said, section 24. Autumn doesn't arrive all at once. It peeks in. A chill breeze during morning chores. A leaf or two drifting sideways instead of downward. The sound of crows starting to carry more meaning than you'd like. Then, just as you start to ignore it, it takes over. The moss darkens. The maples blush. The pond stops reflecting and starts remembering. And suddenly, the whole tea house seems to take a long, slow breath in. Even your master seems quieter, like a kettle that's been taken off the fire, but still simmers with purpose. Autumn, he says, is the most honest season. There's nothing to prove anymore. The flowers have bloomed. The guests have come and gone. The fireflies have returned to wherever it is that tiny ghosts go. Now, it's about letting go. Ceremonies reflect this shift. The hearth returns indoors. The tools change once more. Dark bowls, heavier scoops, charcoal stacked for deeper heat. Even the water ladle seems to move more slowly, dipping into the iron kettle like a crane searching for its reflection. And the tea, it's still the same matcha, but now it tastes different, deeper, slightly bitter, like it knows something about endings. You begin leading more ceremonies. Your master observes less, instructs less. He sits off to the side now, like a shadow that doesn't need to move to be felt. The boy watches you more closely than ever. You teach him the spirals in the ash. You guide his fingers through the folding. You correct him only when necessary, which, to your surprise, isn't as often as you expect. One afternoon, you catch him practicing in the empty tea room, whispering the guest greetings to a line of small garden stones he's placed on the mat. You don't laugh. You bow, because he's learning the thing that took you months, maybe years, to grasp. Tea is not about impressing people. It's about welcoming them, even when they're made of stone. One morning, your master surprises you with a guest. An old friend, he says, gesturing to a tall, thin man in travelling robes with an impossibly elegant moustache. You host them both, and it goes well, really well, until you realise you've placed the tea caddy slightly off-centre, by a hair's breadth. You catch the error halfway through the service. A slight tilt, An angle meant for a different season. You almost panic. Almost. But instead, you breathe. You let it be. The ceremony continues. The tea is served, and neither guest says a word. Afterward, as you clean the tools, your master approaches. He says, "You made a mistake." You nod. He adds, "And you didn't fix it." Another nod. Then, surprisingly, he smiles. "Good." You blink. He continues, "If you'd fixed it, you'd have drawn attention to it. Broken the moment. You let it be. That's tea." You bow, deeper than usual. The boy later asks, "Did you mess up?" You reply, "A little." He frowns, but they smiled. "Because I didn't let the mistake matter more than the tea." He doesn't fully understand, but he'll get there. The next few weeks roll in like slow fog. You lead more. The boy begins warming the room before your ceremonies. He fetches water, checks for charcoal, folds his cloth without instruction. And one day, your master says, he's ready for his first guest. The boy drops the water ladle in excitement. You spend that night preparing him, not just the movements, but the presence, the silence, the trust. He nods, serious, then asks, "What if I forget everything?" You smile. "Then fold the cloth. That always helps." He folds. 3 times. Perfect. The next morning, you and your master sit off to the side as the boy prepares the tea. It's slow, awkward. A whisk clatters once, but his bow is deep. His breath is steady. And when the guest drinks the tea, they smile like they've been handed something small and beautiful. Your master says nothing, just nods. Later that evening, the leaves outside turn red. A gust sends several spinning into the garden. You sit by the window, sipping your own bowl. The room is quiet, still. The kind of stillness that doesn't need commentary. And in that moment, you realize you're not learning anymore. You're practicing. There's a difference. You're not trying to become a tea person. You are one. Winter doesn't knock. It just walks in one morning and sits on your spine. You wake beneath 3 layers of cloth, and still your breath fogs the air like incense. The tea house creaks. The pond has stopped pretending to be liquid. The moss turns brittle and grey, like it's auditioning for a no play about despair. Your master announces it's time to open the sunken hearth, row, a seasonal shift in the layout of the tea room where the kettle moves from a side brazier to a recessed square in the tatami. A small change, a massive impact. It's like the room is tucking its knees in. Everything feels closer now, more intimate. The steam rises straighter, the fire crackles louder, and when you kneel near the hearth, your knees actually thank you. Winter tea is different, not just in flavour, but in soul. The matcha you scoop now is darker, deeper, like it's been waiting for the cold to arrive so it can be taken seriously. You learn to warm the tea bowl just so, letting it cradle the heat like a sleeping animal. The whisk softens slowly in the warm water. Even the scoop seems heavier, like the cold has thickened it. Your master is even quieter than usual. He spends long hours in the corner, writing on rice paper with a brush so fine it might be made of fox whiskers. When you ask what he's writing, he says, "Silence." You do not press. One afternoon, a delivery arrives, a thick envelope tied in gold thread. Your master opens it without ceremony, reads it, grunts, then passes it to you. It's a formal invitation. You have been asked to serve tea for a small winter gathering of travelling monks and scholars, outsiders, but serious ones. Your name is written in ink, your title, host. You read it again, just to be sure you didn't dream it. Your master just says, "Don't boil the water too fast. They'll hear it." You prepare for days. You polish every tool. You test the hearth ash spiral 3 times. The 3rd time, it looks like the eye of a very serene storm. The boy offers to help. You let him fold the guest napkins. He does it too eagerly, and they all come out shaped like slightly confused birds. You redo them. Then you show him how to make tea for winter. He watches, breath fogging in the cold, as you ladle the water not too hot, not too loud, and let the tea melt into the bowl like snow. It's like the tea is hibernating, he whispers. You nod. Exactly. The day of the gathering arrives. The garden is frozen. The sky is blank. The only colour is the red of your matcha tin. The guests arrive in silence, monks with frost on their eyebrows, scholars whose robes rustle like old maps. You welcome them, kneel, begin, and everything is slower. The sound of the ladle against the iron kettle is a lullaby. The steam rises, catching the winter light through the paper screens. You scoop, whisk, present, bow. Each bowl returns empty. Each guest bows longer than expected. The final scholar, a man with hands like bundled twigs, says, "This tea tastes like it remembered something." You say nothing, but you smile, because so do you. After the guests leave, your master sits beside the hearth. The boy brings you both bowls, carefully made, slightly over-whisked, but full of intent. Your master sips, nods, then mutters, "He's not terrible." You sip. The tea is warm, thick, comforting. It tastes like winter should. Your master finishes his bowl, leans back and says, "You'll be in charge during the new year." You freeze. He adds, "I'll be away, visiting an old teacher, or maybe becoming one." You look at him. He doesn't meet your eyes, just adds, "Don't let the boy burn down the estate." Then he stands and leaves the room. You sit by the hearth for a long time. The boy eventually returns, asking, "Did he mean it?" You nod. He sits beside you, silent for once. The fire cracks softly. Outside, a snowflake lands on the window paper and stays for just a second, just long enough to melt. You fold your fukusa, slowly, deliberately, one fold, 2, 3. The cloth rests in your lap, just like always, just like never before. The new year dawns with ice on the eaves and the unmistakable sound of responsibility breathing down your neck. Your master is gone, left before sunrise with a single travel pouch, a walking stick, and what he claimed was just enough rice to get in trouble. No fanfare, no bow, just a nod that somehow carried half a lifetime of trust. And so, the tea house is yours. It doesn't feel that way at first. The rooms are quieter, too quiet. You catch yourself expecting his voice after each misstep, only to be greeted by birds and wind. The scroll in the tea room now bears a single character. Kokoro, heart. You didn't hang it. You suspect he did, just before leaving. The boy, for his part, doesn't seem fazed. In fact, he declares this the greatest promotion in tea history, and insists on being called assistant to the assistant host. You allow it. It keeps him folding napkins with surprising vigor. Your first official task as temporary head of the tea house, prepare for Hatsugama, the first kettle of the new year. A tradition among tea practitioners, Hatsugama is more than just a seasonal restart. It's a declaration. Yes, the world has not ended. Now let's have tea about it. You clean the hearth more thoroughly than ever. You rewrap the scoop. You inspect the whisk until it seems unfair to keep bothering it. The kettle is polished to a mirror shine. Not because anyone will notice, but because you'll know. You invite just one guest, the boy. He sits awkwardly in the formal position, legs already beginning to regret their life choices. You bow, begin, and somehow everything moves without effort. Not perfect, but flowing. You forget to second bow to the water container. The boy notices, but instead of pointing it out, he offers a micro nod, recognition without scolding. It's strangely affirming. When the tea is whisked and served, he accepts it with exaggerated grace, sipping like a poet in a dramatic scroll painting. Then he sighs. "This," he says, "tastes like a New Year should." You laugh. "Which is?" He shrugs. "Scary, but warm." You can't argue with that. Later, you both clean the tools in silence. The sun climbs a little higher, and somewhere between the cloth folds and the soft clicking of porcelain, you realize you're doing it, not pretending, not rehearsing, just doing. In the days that follow, the The tea house finds a rhythm. Guests return, some curious, some cautious. Most have heard that the master is away and that you are now pouring the tea. You bow, serve, and let them come to their own conclusions. Many return. One even brings a scroll as a gift. It reads, Ichi-go Ichi-e, one time, one meeting. A reminder that no moment in tea, or in life, is ever repeated exactly. You hang it in the preparation room, just beside where the scoops rest. The boy continues to practice. He tries to serve a squirrel once. It does not go well. He now has a new respect for real guests. You teach him how to arrange charcoal for the colder mornings, how to fold the wiping cloth without making it look like origami gone wrong, how to bow with intent instead of apology. Each night, he asks, do you think the master will be proud when he returns? You always say, he already was. It takes him weeks to believe it. One evening, a new guest arrives. She's elderly, wrapped in so many layers of cloth she seems more cloud than person. But her voice is clear, and her steps certain. You serve her tea. She drinks it. And afterwards, she says softly, your teacher used to serve with the sadness of memory. You serve with the steadiness of presence. You bow. Thank you. She leans in. And your apprentice is watching you with the hunger of someone who might surpass you one day. You glance toward the boy, who is currently trying to balance 3 scoops on his forehead. Possibly, you say. After she leaves, you sit outside beneath the full moon. The boy joins you. He's quiet. You both are. The frost crunches gently along the roof tiles. The kettle hums in the tea room behind you, forgotten for a moment, but still warm. You whisper, we're not just making tea anymore. He blinks. What are we making? You think. Then say, a place. He looks at the house, then back at you. I like our place, he says. And for the first time, you believe it. By the end of January, the tea house no longer feels like something you inherited. It feels like something you tend, like a fire, or a garden, or an old story whispered through time. The boy begins waking earlier than you now. You find him most mornings sweeping the path from the gate, muttering sternly at the stones for not aligning themselves better. His enthusiasm is chaos in cloth form, but it's also contagious. He insists on preparing you a bowl of tea each morning. The results vary wildly. One day, it's too weak, like hot water that once heard of matcha. Another, it's so thick you need to chew it. But he bows deeply every time, folds the cloth like it's an origami crane with anxiety, and watches your face like you might declare his soul a failure based on the froth pattern. You never correct him right away. Instead, you drink, reflect, then offer a single note. Smooth a wrist next time. Try less water. Breathe before you pour. He nods, always, learning not just the steps, but the space between them. You remember how it felt, how it still feels, because truthfully, even now, you still question every ceremony. Did I bow deep enough? Was the scoop steady? Did the guest feel the tea? But the doubt is softer now, more like mist than fog, and you begin to understand something your master once said but never explained. Tea doesn't remove uncertainty, it welcomes it. February arrives, trailing snowflakes like crumbs. One evening, the wind blows open the gate mid-ceremony. The boy leaps up to close it, his feet slipping on ice. The guest, an older woman with a gaze that could carve stone, lets out a single chuckle. Later, she says, your tea was not perfect. You brace yourself. But it was true, she adds. And that's all she says. But it's enough. The next week, a scroll arrives by courier. From your master. No letter. No explanation. Just the scroll. You open it carefully. 4 characters, bold and fluid. Sho Shinsha no Kokoro. The heart of a beginner. You hang it immediately. It's both a reminder and a gift. Because now, even as you lead, you do so with that same heart. Eager, curious, quiet. The boy asks about the phrase. You tell him what it means. He asks, but what if I don't want to be a beginner forever? You smile. Then you're already losing it. He looks offended, then confused, then thoughtful. Later, you find him kneeling alone in the tea room, repeating the cloth folding silently to himself. 3 folds, 1 breath, no audience, no rush. Just practice, just presence, just heart. In early March, the first plum blossoms appear. The garden wakes up slowly. Buds form on brittle branches. The pond creaks back into motion. A frog is spotted and named by the boy. He calls it Mochi. Ceremonies begin to feel lighter again, still slow, still reverent, but with a little lift. A hint of season in each bowl. You swap out the thickest implements for ones with more breath. Dark bowls give way to speckled ones. The kettle still steams, but it hums now instead of brooding. The boy prepares his first full ceremony for a stranger. You watch from the side, silent. He bows, serves, moves like someone afraid to blink. And yes, he forgets to reorient the natsume, tea caddy. The whisk stutters once. His sleeve brushes the ladle, but the guest drinks, smiles, thanks him, and the boy returns to the prep room beaming. I did it, he says. You nod. Yes. I messed up. Yes. But I didn't stop. Exactly. That evening, he brings you tea, a simple bowl, nothing fancy, but it tastes like someone trying, fully and honestly, and that's the rarest flavor of all. You sip it slowly. He watches. You finish. And this time, you say nothing. Just bow. He bows back. Silence lingers between you. Not awkward, just full. And in that silence, you feel something new. You are not replacing your master. You are becoming one. Not in title, but in care. Spring arrives like a whisper that gets louder every day. At first, it's just warmer lights and longer shadows. A shy bird call at dawn. Then, almost overnight, everything blossoms. The plum trees burst into clouds of pink. The bamboo seems greener than nature strictly intended. Even the stones look somehow refreshed. And with it, the tea house exhales. You open the screens again, let in the breeze. Let in the bees, occasionally, which the boy insists are friendly until one decides otherwise. Spring ceremonies are about freshness, lightness, renewal. You switch to thinner bowls again. You select a tea scoop carved with a winding vine design and swap the charcoal pattern to one that suggests unfolding petals. These are not rules, they're feelings, preferences that speak in seasons, not syllables. The boy insists on trying his hand at shakai-seki, the formal meal served before certain ceremonies. It is predictably a disaster. The rice is overcooked. The miso soup is weirdly ambitious. There is a pickled plum involved that may have crossed over from tart into existential crisis. But the arrangement is beautiful. The plates, the bowls, even the chopsticks, placed with such care it nearly distracts from the fact that one of the courses is just 3 decorative leaves and a hot pepper. You eat it all. Say nothing. Because sometimes beauty isn't in the flavor, it's in the offering. You continue hosting guests through early spring. A poet, a gardener, a woman who makes paper by hand and whose fingers carry the scent of bark. Each time the ceremony changes slightly. The temperature, the water's speed, the particular slant of a cloud through the open shoji screen. But your presence stays constant. So does your scoop. Quiet pine, its name worn smoother with each use, becomes more than a tool. It becomes your echo, your witness. A piece of time passed hand to hand. You speak to it sometimes, just softly, while folding cloth. The boy catches you once and accuses you of going mad. You respond, "If I go mad, let it be quietly and with good posture." He accepts this. One morning, you return from fetching water and find a scroll sitting in the prep room, wrapped, familiar. You know the handwriting. You open it slowly. It reads, "Spring does not ask permission." And beneath it, "I'll return when the kettle quiets." No signature, but none needed. You roll the scroll gently. Your fingers tremble slightly. Not from surprise, but from something more like recognition of a cycle turning, of footsteps returning to the path that bore them. The boy asks, "Is it him?" You nod. "Is he coming home?" You smile. He never left. From that day, everything shifts. You're not more formal, not nervous, just more aware. You begin preparing not just for guests, but for him. You polish the brazier, sweep the stones along the garden path. You even rewrap the scoops, not because they needed it, but because it felt right. Then, on a clear day when the sky is pretending not to be infinite, he returns. No ceremony, just a quiet knock on the gate and the shuffle of old sandals across dry pebbles. You bow as he enters. So does the boy. Your master bows back. He says nothing at first, just looks around, touches the edge of the hearth, gazes at the hanging scrolls. Finally, he says, "The garden learned how to listen." You don't know if he's talking about the moss or about you, maybe both. You prepare tea, simple, precise, no flourishes, but with presence, with care. You serve him. He drinks, and when he finishes, he places the bowl down like one sets a final stone on a long wall. He says only, "Good." And that one word contains all the seasons. The next day, your master doesn't resume command. He doesn't reclaim the tea house, doesn't check your logs, doesn't correct your cloth folds. Instead, he sits on the veranda with a small tin of roasted barley tea and lets the sun warm his knees. "I'm retired," he mutters, squinting at the sky. "Officially, I think." You suspect this retirement may involve suspiciously long walks to inspect the thickness of ash spirals or to question the precise tilt of a tea bowl, casually, of course. Just a passing glance, certainly not meddling, but you understand. He's given the reins. Now he lets them go. The boy doesn't quite know what to make of it. He keeps offering your master tea at random intervals, apparently worried he'll vanish if not sufficiently steeped. Your master eventually growls, "I didn't die, I just sat down." Still, the house hums differently now. Guests arrive and bow to you. Some know, some don't. But all of them feel the center has shifted. You continue hosting, with slightly more confidence, slightly less apology. The ceremonies move like wind through silk. The tools respond like old friends. And the boy? The boy becomes something new. His movements begin to smooth. His posture starts to hold itself. He no longer talks to the tools. He listens. One evening, you find him alone in the garden, setting stones in a line, not just for fun, for focus. A walking meditation disguised as teenage fidgeting. When he notices you, he smiles sheepishly. "Do you ever stop hearing the kettle in your head?" he asks. You consider. No, but eventually it stops boiling over. He nods, then keeps walking, adjusting one stone just a little to the left. Your master appears beside you at some point. "You've trained him well," he says. You shake your head. "He trained himself. I just kept the fire lit." He doesn't reply, but you hear him exhale, and that's louder than words. One morning, a bird perches on the tea house roof and begins an elaborate series of calls. The boy insists it's good luck. Your master insists it's a nuisance. You say nothing but serve tea as if the bird were a guest. It seems satisfied. Another week passes. Another season nears. You feel it in the wind, crisper, slower, in the moss, greener somehow, in the way the light filters through the screen, golden and thin like old paper. One evening, the three of you sit together on the back steps. No ceremony, just cups of roasted tea. No matcha, no ladles, no scrolls. The boy says, "I don't want it to end." Your master replies, "It doesn't. It just changes clothes." You chuckle. The boy frowns. But if everything changes, what stays the same? You and your master share a glance. Then, softly, you say, "The invitation." He squints. "To what?" You smile. "To be present." He quiets. The wind sighs through the garden. A frog croaks somewhere in the pond. Probably mochi. You finish your tea. Your master stands slowly, joints clicking like old wood. He nods to you, to the boy, then says, "Well, if I'm going to be replaced, I suppose this isn't the worst outcome." You smirk. "High praise." He shrugs. "Don't let it go to your head." Then disappears into the prep room to avoid looking sentimental. The boy asks, "What now?" You fold your hands, tilt your head toward the hearth. "We keep the water hot." That night, you dream of folding cloth, over and over. But each fold feels different, familiar, final. And when you wake, the scoop rests in its silk wrapping, just where you left it, just waiting. The last of the cherry blossoms fall like exhausted confetti. They drift across the garden path, collecting in soft piles at the base of stones and on the edge of the veranda. Each one a tiny farewell. Each one whispering, "Now." Now. Now you brush them aside as you prepare the room. This morning's guest is not a scholar, a poet, or a traveling monk. She is simply a woman from the village, a seamstress, you think, curious, quiet, a little nervous. You greet her warmly, no theatrics, just honesty. You serve tea, slowly, not to impress, not to prove, just to offer. And something happens, not dramatic, just perfect. The water flows with the exact hush you hoped for. The scoop lands softly. The bowl warms like held breath. And when she sips, her shoulders ease just a little, barely a flutter, but you catch it. That's enough. That's everything. After she leaves, you do not reset the room right away. You sit. Let the kettle hum beside you, the warmth curling up your spine. The boy appears, carrying 2 bowls and a tin of sweets shaped like camellia blossoms. He sits without asking, pours tea for both of you. His whisking is steady now, confident but not showy. He hands you your bowl. You sip. It tastes like light. You ask, "What made you choose these sweets?" He grins. "Because they disappear." You nod. Because of course. Outside, the wind picks up. Petals scatter again. You let them. Later, your master steps in, carrying a small wooden box. He places it before you, opens it. Inside is a tea scoop. Not yours, not quiet pine. This one is new, still pale, still unspeaking. He says, "It needs a name." You blink. "Why me?" He gestures to the tea room. "Because it belongs here now, with you." You lift it gently. It fits your hand perfectly, like a promise you hadn't made yet. You turn it, inspect the curve, say nothing. He waits, and finally you whisper, "Early mist." He nods, says, "Then that's its name." The boy watches you both like someone watching a chapter close. Then he whispers, "Will I get to name one someday?" Your master smirks, "Only if you don't drop it." Later that evening, the house is silent. No guests, no chores. Just the 3 of you sitting by the hearth, watching the embers fade. Your master speaks just once. Most people think tea is about stillness, but it's not. It's about attention. You say, "Same thing, isn't it?" He shrugs, "Only if you're paying attention." The boy asks, "And what is this moment about?" You don't answer. You just listen. To the kettle, to the garden, to the quiet bowl of steam resting between your palms. Because this moment isn't about learning anymore, or proving, or remembering. It's about being. And right now, you are still here, warm, present. So now, let the bowl rest. Let the fire sink low. There's nothing else to pour, nothing else to fold, nothing left to perfect. The room around you softens into shadow, its corners no longer holding edges, just the breath of sleep gently settling in. The kettle's hum fades to a whisper, then quieter still, like the memory of a sound. The scoop rests exactly where it should. The cloth hangs in its perfect fold. Even the boy, talkative, buzzing, ever curious, is silent now, tucked away in dreams of tea and frogs and miso disasters. And you have done enough. More than enough. You took the day, the bowl, the mistake, the moment, and turned them into something whole. That's all tea ever asked of you. That's all today ever required. You may forget the steps tomorrow, the angles, the temperature, even the name of the scoop, but something deeper has settled in your hands now. A stillness that isn't empty, a silence that holds. So as your own breath slows, and your limbs soften like moss beneath moonlight, know this, the invitation remains, to be here, to be gentle, to begin again, whenever you need to. The tea waits for no one, but it welcomes everyone, especially you. So rest now. The ceremony is over, and the peace you feel, it was yours all along. Good night.